Hello and welcome to I Am the Party, and I am Paul. I'm so excited to be talking to you again and to share the space with you. I wanted to dump all of my actual play content into one mega episode as a place for new listeners to get it all in one go and get caught up with the entirety of my game and story in anticipation of future episodes. It's a little rough in places, but I try to get it down to just the play or story itself, starting with the character creation process and all the way through my sessions, ending with episode 11's cliffhanger. I hope you enjoy it, and I look forward to creating new content soon. The background for my game as it evolved, while I was thinking about what do I want to do and my inspirations, what kind of stories I'm excited about in the world of fantasy, it's going to give me like good exposure to testing some rules out within just a sample dungeon that I can pick up. And so I ended up creating a squad, a sort of military, paramilitary-like squad of characters. The inspiration really comes from my favorite fantasy series of all time, the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and those characters are beloved to me. I came up with this concept of the stewards being kind of a cult of rangers, not exactly priestly or monk-like, a warrior cult who trains individuals to go out into the wilds and try to reestablish lanes of civilization from one village to the next. And that's the idea that it is a fallen world, it's a dark world, there's a lot of bad stuff out there, a lot of dangers just around every corner, around every tree, down every path. Any village, any little point of civilization, that's your point of light. The characters are really in the world and in the story to help protect those points of light. And in my case, with the stewards, their plan is to try to not just protect, but connect, reestablish some semblance of a loose civilization out there in what I call the Greater Eastern Wilds. And that's a point where I don't have much of a map laid out, but I just have this imagery of a large landscape just east of a huge mountain range where it's limited travel across the mountain range. And to the west, you have established civilization, you have maybe a kingdom or an empire of some sort. So once you cross over these mountains, you're into the Greater Eastern Wilds, and it's a dangerous place. That brings us to the characters again, or brings us back to the characters, I should say. My plan was to give myself think about what things I needed to give myself for each of my characters to help the story move along and to help give me some things I can sink my teeth into, but also not give too much detail. Combination of Fate Accelerated Edition and then also using the Black Hack usage die primarily. I think that's going to give me a lot of freedom when I actually play. To roll up my characters, and the first thing I rolled up was a D20 motivation table, which cobbled together for myself. Then once each character had a basic motivation, some examples are empowerment, revenge, grief, community, growth, love. Once I had that for each character, I then rolled to see what their two main stats or approaches would be. And so this is, again, pulling from Fate Accelerated Edition. So I used their 6 approaches: careful, clever, flashy, forceful, quick, and sneaky. For each character, I rolled a d6 because there's 6 different approaches, and I just rolled that twice. Their first stat that I rolled, that was their primary stat. The second stat that I rolled was their secondary stat. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that actually means for primary and secondary. Here's another inspiration. I think it's Cairn the RPG. I don't have that in front of me right now, but I know that's not the only rule set. A lot of OSR rule sets use gear slots as far as keeping track of that. I'm not an encumbrance guy or tracking arrows by any means kind of guy. So I just gave each character 10 gear slots, one for each of their hands, 2 spots on their body for like easy access, and then 6 for stowage, like on a backpack or rucksack. So that's the default that I gave all of them. Gave them all rations. Rations has been abstracted out as well using the usage die. One of the bigger things that I had is that I rolled for their squad role. So each steward is trained in a specialty area. I just identified quickly 8 squad roles. So chaplain, squad fist, squad mage, sapper, scout, sergeant, skirmisher, and stalker. And again, I rolled a d8 for each of my characters. If I had any repeats, I re-rolled because I don't want any redundancy or I don't know. It might be interesting to have 2 mages in a squad, but I wanted to try out just having 4 different types of resources across my characters. So once I rolled that, I also had some starting gear that each of the characters, based off of their role, that they had added to their gear slots. that was pretty much all the main aspects of my characters. I'm looking at them. Ended up with picking a steward name, which is more like a nickname, a military nickname, something that they probably earned one way or another through their training as a steward. Once I had that, picked their pronouns, and I'd be good to go. Those are the aspects of my characters. Who are my characters? Well, I ended up with, start with Sarge. And Sarge is both the character's nickname and incidentally, or not incidentally, their role. I don't have a more specific name for Sarge yet. I also don't have more specific pronouns than they, them. I'm kind of leaving that open for the time being. But with Sarge, so being the sergeant, they already have local area maps and orienting tools, orienteering tools in their gear, as well as their options of weapons, because they're kind of like more of a jack of all trades type of character. So I gave my sergeant a two-handed longsword because it sounded cool. In addition to that, all of the stewards have the same basic standard hardened boiled leather, some type of cloak. I'm thinking maybe a maroon or something like that, or faded maroon, or even faded gray, like in Sarge's case, because Sarge has been traveling the wilds for a while. Maybe has a better idea of what's out there, a little bit older. My second character that I rolled up, her name is Sax, Sacks, as in sacks of gold. Oh, I forgot to mention, sorry, before I go on to Sax, Sarge's motivation, I ended up rolling order, which I thought was kind of neat. I think it makes sense if you're going to be the leader of a squad that goes out into the wilds. Just so happened that Sarge values order. That's their motivation. Sax, her motivation was grief, which I was really excited actually to roll that up for Sax. I began, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in detail, I began to develop kind of like a backstory of the squad as I rolled up their motivations, what things they were good at, what their roles were, what roles I didn't have in the squad. That was really interesting too, to think, I could have up to 8 different characters in my squad, but I only have 4. So why are we only at half strength? That's something else that's kind of, I hope to explore at least through play. So her motivation is grief at being, let's see, what did I roll for Sax? I rolled a skirmisher. So skirmishers get 2 one-handed weapons, so 1 slot for each hand, and then is also a throwing weapon, can be salvaged most of the time. And what I mean by most of the time is at the end of each fighting scene, or each time that the throwing weapon is used, I'll assign some usage die to it to see if it's kind of getting mangled up or needs repairs or whatever. The skirmisher doesn't really have any other role-specific gear, but I just kind of fashion it off of a character who jumps into the midst of things, maybe throws a throwing axe before and into the goblin pack, and then brings down her 2 hatchets or 2 short swords or something like that in a whirlwind, a dervish-like attack. Sax's main approach that I rolled up was quick, and then she has sneaky as a secondary. Tal's, her motivation was survival, also a very good role when you're out in the wilderness and exploring the wilds. For her, I rolled up a squad mage, actually, which was like, oh, okay, all right. I got some magic in the party. That's cool. Being the squad mage, this world that I'm imagining, I'm starting to create, is very fluid with the magic. The magic system is really more of an art than a science. By default, in her inventory, we have scrolls, we have magical charms. I went with just kind of boring traditional weaponry as far as a mage or wizard goes. So she has a staff that takes up 2 hand slots. And then for her approaches, quick was her main approach, and then flashy was her secondary approach. And I was excited for those 2 for a mage. I think that's really interesting. I think we have someone who is at times subtle, at times flashy, as the approach would indicate. It is maybe not so much like I cast fireball at every problem that I see. It may be more of a clever, sneaky mage and wizard than like the powerful, like shoots lightning bolts from their fingertips. And then for the 4th and final squad member, I have Deadlock, and his motivation was power, and I thought that was cool too. I'm like, I loved all 4 motivations. I was like, this is giving me, I don't know if I could have rolled bad ones. Essentially, this is giving me some exciting things to play around with, because none of the motivations are the same either. So they all have their own personal things that they're leaning towards. As the scout of the squad that I rolled up for Deadlock, he has a traditional longbow, which takes both hands to shoot, as well as a quiver attached to his body. And then he also has stowed on his body a spyglass, so he can see great distances easily. I actually see having a scout and a sergeant in the same squads. The sergeant's got those orienteering tools, local maps. The scout's got the spyglass. Like, I feel like I'm gonna do really well in the woods, basically, if I need to play out some travel. And my characters are gonna be pretty aware of their surroundings, I think. That's one thing that they'll have going for them as a squad. Let's see. And then as far as approaches go, primary approach for Deadlock was sneaky. and the secondary approach was clever. Those were great. I did forget, I don't know, I just kind of blew through Sarge. Sarge's primary, going back to my first character here, primary approach is careful, and their secondary approach is clever. So I got a couple of clever people in the squad. I think there's going to be, there's more of a finesse style of play overall that I'm seeing. Well, first of all, I didn't roll up any squad role like Fist or Stalker. Those are like kind of the two more fighty, shooty, strikery kind of squad roles in my head. I didn't roll up anyone that uses forceful as either of their approaches. I thought that was interesting that my squad ended up not having a forceful character whatsoever, so they're not just be breaking down doors left and right. Finally, I decided to try this out. So I rolled kind of just for the squad itself, some of these same things. So for the motivation of the squad, rolled on the same table, and I rolled fear. And I was really excited about that also. I didn't intentionally have fear be 13 on the D20 result, but just lucked out that was kind of neat. It's on there, so I'm keeping it. I think it's interesting now that I have this idea that the squad as a whole, they're afraid of something. There's fear when they're collectively working towards a goal. Fear is maybe that driving force for them overall as a unit. I'm not attaching anything to these next two things that I rolled up for them, but I did roll like a kind of primary and secondary approach that maybe the squad uses overall. And again, primary approach, I rolled for sneaky. Secondary approach, I rolled for clever. So it just kind of reinforces, I guess, what I think of as what these four individuals, how they kind of operate as a whole, as a unit. One of the other things is that in addition to your approaches that you have for each character, their squad role also is a stat. And so continuing my trend of just stealing from all the games that I really like and I'm interested in, Mouse Guard, Burning Wheel by extension, but I never played Burning Wheel, I'm just a Mouse Guard fan, has a stat for characters and NPCs like of nature, and that's like their nature of whatever type of creature they are. Mice are the heroes in a world where everything is bigger than them. They have mouse nature. It's in their nature. Whatever is in their nature as a mouse, sometimes you can roll that. And so I was like, well, that's very handy, and it makes sense to be a good catch-all. How light this system is that I'm working with, I think just having another good, like, let's use an example. Deadlock, who has a scout stat by virtue of being the scout role. Sometimes if Deadlock's trying to do something that is more applicable to his training or his skill set as a scout, I could roll for that versus like sneaky or clever. Now, right now, Deadlock as a primary sneaky has a D8 in sneaky, and then all of the squad rolls start as a D8 as well. Why do I care about that? They're both D8s. The stats are the same. Why would I use either one? Well, the main thing, if you haven't noticed yet, I don't have hit points. I don't have hardly anything. Hardly anything to like track or keep track of. Instead, going back to that good old Black Hack 2nd Edition, I'm using the usage die mechanic as their stat. When I said both Sneaky and Scout for Deadlock have a D8, that means that if I'm trying to do something in a scene and Deadlock's the one who's doing it and he has a sneaky approach to it, then I roll a D8. And if it's anything other than a 1 or a 2, it's a success. Anything above a 2 on my dice are going to be a success. Anytime a 1 or 2 shows up, not only is that a failure for the character and what they're attempting to do, it also drops the die one size, kind of showing fatigue, loss of stamina, wear and tear. Not only do I fail, but my future ability is also reduced from a D8 to a D6, at least until I rest or get some healing or get a motivational speech, whatever. There's going to be conditions where I could heal up, but that's the idea, is that's going to be the main limiting factor of how far into a dungeon my squad can go, is that their stats, their stamina is going to decrease over time. And once I hit D4, I can continue to roll D4 for their approaches, not for the roll. Once I hit a D4 and I fail that for a roll, you've extended all your experience, all your special tricks and tips as the squad scout. You've used them up, and you gotta get some rest to kind of recuperate those. Your approaches, you're sneaky, you're clever. You can continue to roll D4 on those at any time, but you're at 50-50 odds at that point. And every time you fail on a D4, it's gonna hurt. To continue to push, it's possible, but it's really going to exhaust the party overall. That's the basics of how my characters look right now. One of my goals was to think of, I'm going to have 4 characters to juggle. I'm also going to have a dungeon to read. I have this microphone in front of my face. I have to be thinking in real time, be creative in real time. All of that is challenging on its own. So I didn't want to have like full D&D 5th edition 4 character sheets, or even Dungeon Crawl Classics 4 character sheets sitting in front of me trying to like keep track of. So for me, I had to really simplify it. As I'm going through a dungeon, as my characters are experiencing setbacks and tragedies and challenges that maybe they're not prepared for, trying to be more concrete and more visceral, using all the senses, that kind of a thing, to describe how they interact with the environment. I think that will be helpful for me personally to make my characters feel like they're really coming alive. The first adventure is a Dungeon Crawl Classics adventure. It is The Rift of Sleeping Night. It's a level 1 adventure. The adventure is by Jess Gabriel Cron and edited by Reverend Dak J. Ultimac. I'm choosing Dungeon Crawl Classics as well because the way that the modules work is that it gives me some, like if I was the GM, some read out loud material that I will read as part of my own play. My thought is I'm going to do the read out loud, give some reactions and some actions from my characters, narrate, think out loud how they would approach a scene, how they're going to kind of overcome whatever the challenge is of the room. And then I'll start to look into like the more description, the behind the scenes stuff that the GM only would have access to. And then see how that works, see if there's natural consequences. After responding to a dire summons from Solgren, Elder Druid of the peaceful city of Sphere, you now find yourselves high among the Torith Mountains upon the mesa of a large sunny outcropping of rock where the city of Sphere sits on the threshold of Baltothum's peak. A tawny crowd of monks and townsfolk watch your approach with hushed anticipation. As you make your way up the large staircase toward the temple, you see a banner bearing the Spherian crest, an orange circle surrounded by 9 outwardly pointing triangles, flying from the highest spherical turret as you approach Solgren, who sits upon a cushion in the temple gardens, smiling at you warmly. Welcome to Sphere, that which is closest to the sun. I will waste no time getting to the matter at hand. For hundreds of years our great immortal wizard Baltothum has dwelt in the peak north of our city. Our people have lived for centuries here in Sphere, under his protection, going about our quiet lives in deep solar contemplation and peaceful worship. However, a few years ago we have noticed disturbing changes in our studies. The nights have been beginning increasingly early, and the days increasingly late. Dark creatures have been seen swarming the night skies, and our people have been disappearing. Our crops are beginning to fail due to a lack of adequate sunlight. We believe that some terrible fate has befallen Baltothum deep in his outpost. Unfortunately, there are none among us who are of the skill and fortitude required for this task. This quest falls upon you alone, and if you do not succeed, we fear that his seeping darkness will one day cover the entirety of Aerith, to the doom of all. You must find what has happened to Baltothum, and if there is a way, drive back the night. Please, follow me. Solgren leads your party through the temple, and out of a rear entrance to stand before a long, thin staircase, ascending the mountain behind the city. Solgren speaks again, this time with a sense of finality in his voice. If you could find an end to this impending doom, I shall bestow upon each of you a rare and valuable Spherian sapphire. In addition to this reward, you may also bask in the knowledge that all things that live in this land will owe you an enormous debt of gratitude. With that, Solgren walks back to his meditation and leaves you to ascend. There will be 100% spoilers. I intend to go through this entire adventure just by going through it as if I was playing, sitting in the room with you and reading everything out loud to experience it in real time. And I also am not going to try to pull any of my punches when it comes to damage and threats to my characters' lives. I don't have hit points exactly, but there is a general sense of how much damage maybe my characters have taken by how often and how low they've dropped their dice in their stats. We have this scene. We're up in the mountains, the Torith Mountains. There's a isolated city Sphere. I mentioned previously that the adventure setting itself I'm referring to as the Greater Eastern Wilds. There is a mountain side. We're barely east of the mountains, and we're up in the mountains already. And there's a vast land down below that stretches beyond what the eye can see. But right now we're facing east. We're facing west in the mountains that separate the Greater Eastern Wilds from the rest of the land. That being said, Sphere is one of these points of light. I mentioned that the Greater Eastern Wilds is a pretty isolated area, even from one settlement to the next. Sphere is one of these places Coincidentally, they worship the light. They are like a sun cult. They are one of these places where, as stewards, my squad of characters wants to stabilize. They want to create a safe place to maybe launch further adventures from. So helping these guys out might be a place for the stewards to get a foothold into the Greater Eastern Wilds, or to just expand their influence. The 4 stewards now have been led to large stairwell built into the mountain itself. So they climb that together, and eventually they reach this area, and we are trying to investigate what's going on with Baltothum. He is the immortal wizard. So we have two old men essentially that are leading this town. We have Solgren, the elder druid, who I guess is not immortal. I don't know. I don't know if druids are necessarily not immortal and wizards can be. Are left to our own devices from Solgren. And we begin now into the solar outpost of Baltothum. So this first area that we arrive at, it's called the Stone Foyer. The entrance to the outpost appears as a large foyer carved back deep into the ochre-hued rock face. 3 columns line either side of the vestibule. A depiction of the Spherian crest carved into the 2 centermost columns faces in toward the middle of the room. A large compass rose is etched in the wall opposite the entrance. All right, so I have some material here to work with for my characters to interact with. We have the 3 columns that are lined either side of this vestibule. Depiction of the Spherian crest, and again, that's triangles surrounding a circle, like the sun. Those crests are carved into the 2 innermost column faces that are facing in towards the middle of the room. There's this large compass that's etched into the wall opposite the entrance. We don't really have an entrance, though. It looks like I got to figure out break my way into Baltothum's outpost here. But I think what I'm going to be doing, out of the 4 characters, Sarge is probably hanging back a little bit, trying to take in the scene. So I'm not going to roll anything for Sarge. I think they are just trying to get a sense of the surroundings and be like tactically aware. So perhaps they have a hand on the hilt of their longsword that's kept at their hip. We'll see if they need to draw that at any point. I'm sure at some point, but we'll see if the doors themselves are a dangerous place. And then we have, we have Talls, who's a mage. Mages tend to be clever. It's hard to tell right now. Maybe there's something magical to do with this large compass rose that's etched in the wall opposite the entrance, or maybe something to do with these columns. So I think I'm going to have Talls roll a mage. Again, a review of the system. Talls has 3 stats: quick, flashy, and mage. Just a d6 as the stat for mage. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is when I roll a stat to see, what kind of outcome I can expect from a character's efforts in a scene, I'm also going to roll a fudge die, actually, as well, or a fate die, whatever you want to call it. And that's a d6 that has 2 negative sides, 2 neutral sides, and 2 positive sides. That's not going to really give me anything concrete, but it will help me get a sense of whether or not the character's successful in what they're doing. If there's something flavorful in the space, is it good for me? Is it bad for me? Or is there really not much at all? Let's roll this for Talls. First roll of the campaign. Let's see how we do. Terribly. So I rolled a 2 on her mage stat, which is a failure. If anything above a 2 on any dice roll is a success, but with the 2 itself, that's going to hurt. Not only is it a failure, she's not going to really be able to figure out anything that she's investigating here. There's going to be no signs that she can see. But also, the mage die drops down to a d4 for the moment. Not good. Not good at all. All right, so the mage die drops from a d6 to a d4 for the moment. I also rolled a negative in addition to the failure. So, Talls is... Something's going on with Talls. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Otherwise, I was also going to... I have Deadlock as well. And being a scout, definitely think that there's some similar investigation. Probably Talls and Deadlock work from time to time together to figure out, is there a mechanism here? Or is there something else that we can do? So I have a D6 clever for Deadlock. So I'm going to roll that for him along with the fate die again. Let's see what we get. The exact opposite die roll. We get a 6 and a positive sign on the fate die. Great. Okay, so Deadlock's not going to be in bad shape. And in fact, Deadlock's probably going to be able to figure out what's going on in this space by examining both these pillars and the large compass rose. Let's take a look at the GM information here. The compass rose shows north pointing up, east pointing right, south pointing down, and west pointing left. So that makes sense. That is what a compass would show, as you would expect. The stewards investigate the space. And again, that's Deadlock, that's Talls, the two of them trying to figure out what's going on. They have found that the carved pillars can be turned to face either the center of the room or the corresponding wall. By manipulating the pillar on the right of the room so that the image of the Spherian crest faces toward the right wall, and the pillar on the left so that the crest faces the left wall, a trapdoor leading to a descending staircase is revealed. If the PCs get stumped, well, I was lucky. The PCs did not. The stewards themselves did not get stumped. However, the way that this scene plays out is Deadlock is obviously the one that figures out how to manipulate the pillar on the right so that the image of the crest does face the right wall, and the pillar on the left so the crest faces the left wall. So as he is coordinating that, Talls is standing right in the middle of the vestibule, and that trap door, sure enough, that opens up right under her feet, and she goes rolling down that staircase, and it just takes a bunch of bumps and bruises, but maybe more so worse off than anything else, a bump and bruise to her ego. Because Deadlock, as the scout, once again showing his prowess, feels like his motivation of power. This squad needs me. What would they do without me? That's an internal thought, I'll say for now. I think he may be a little bit sneakier and clever than to make that boast out loud. But that's what he's thinking. We have Talls tumbling down the staircase. The mage is definitely leading the party, front of the marching order. And Sarge will give Sax a quick tap on the shoulder and get her moving. And the three of them quickly try to chase down Talls before she gets too far ahead of them into this wizard's home. Clearly, you don't want to get too far ahead and be isolated in a wizard's home. That's a recipe for disaster. So they've gotten to the bottom of the stairwell or the staircase, and now they come to a new room. This chamber is populated by 3 15-foot tall stone statues, each with a circular cavity bored through the chest. Carved around the circular cavity are the 9 outwardly pointing triangles of the Spherian crest. Each statue points a solitary finger in a different direction, and along each statue's pointing arm is a unique, faintly etched runic phrase. To the west, there lies a pathway leading down a long, dark corridor towards some faint, distant luminescence, and to the north is a locked wooden door. Whew, boy, that's a lot of description. What strikes me first in this space are these statues, and my first instinct is always to assume at all times all statues will become animated and try to kill me. That's my general, my general existence is avoid statues. Don't get too close. So these statues have the triangles around this opening in their center cavity, so definitely that Spherian crest is on display here. It's still an important part of it. All of the statues are pointing in a different direction. On their arm, where they're pointing, is a unique, faintly etched runic phrase. It doesn't describe here without some investigation. It looks like just peeking ahead a little bit what those phrases are. So there's definitely going to be some interest in that. So to the west of here, so if we're looking at a map, that's to my right. Let me peek ahead to the map. There's no compass on the map itself. Well, that's tricky. Okay, yeah, that is to the west. Okay, so then there's a hallway to my immediate left. And that is a long, dark corridor leading towards some faint, distant luminescence. And then there's a hallway as well to the north. Well, there's a locked wooden door, excuse me. I don't know if there's a hallway to the north, but there is a locked wooden door that maybe would give me some interesting things behind it as well. At this point, I've got the 4 characters, and I think what I'm going to do is have them split up, because that's the best idea. I'm going to have them split into twos. One of the duos is going to be working on the door to the north to investigate that. They'll do some listening to it and try to maybe jiggle the handle, see if it's locked. If it's not locked, let's see if we can open it. So that's going to be, I'm going to say that's going to be Sarge and Sax. So the two of them, they weren't really active in the last space, but the two of them are going to be investigating that door. Meanwhile, I'm going to have Talls and Deadlock start to make their way a little bit down the room. We're going to down the hallway to the west, that darkened hallway. We're going to actually ignore the statues. We're going to see. We're going to ignore the statues to begin with. Maybe they're nothing at all. Maybe I should not be ignoring them, but we'll find out. Let's have Sarge. Sarge has careful as their main approach, and I think that's actually an astute approach to take when examining this door. So I'm going to roll for Sarge a D8 and the fate die. Let's see what we get. A 4, but a negative. Sarge will be able to investigate this wooden door successfully, but if there's some challenging aspect of it or in the room itself, Sarge is unaware. Sarge is not going to be picking up on that. The other thing, I don't think I'm going to have a roll at this point yet for the other duo, for Talls and Deadlock. I think they're just going to be maybe not really entirely leave the room and wait to see if the door to the north, what kind of situation there is. Looking now at the description, the northern door can be forced open or broken down with a DC 8 strength check. Obviously, I don't have that. That's not really an applicable stat, but that gives me some sense that it's a pretty low strength check. It can be knocked down pretty easily. That's all there is to that. So for the door, it leads to another area. That tells me that. Yeah, I think Sarge is just gonna knock the door down, just destroy it. Having rolled successfully, and I think the negative is that the door will in fact be destroyed and will not be able to be closed again. Not always what you want, and also they're already starting to vandalize this wizard's home. Might also not be what you want. But sure enough, that's what happens. They break the door down in all of their careful efforts. Having been distracted by that, by that excitement, Talls, I think, as the mage, might actually take more of an interest in these statues before they leave the room. I think I'll have Talls roll. She's already down to a D4 on mage, but that's kind of the appropriate stat for her to be rolling, or for her to have as her approach. Yeah, quick and flashy does not apply. So let's roll. I could roll a D4 for her mage stat. I can also roll any of the approaches, always on a D4, if they don't have a higher number. I'm going to stick with the mage stat. So this is now where I'm starting to already get a little risky with my dice rolls, but we'll roll a D4 and the fate die. I got a 3. I got a 3 and a positive, so that's lucky. Talls keeps her D4 mage die for now, and she starts to investigate the statues. All right, so it would be a 15 difficulty check, intelligence check to decipher the inscriptions. I'm going to say, because I got a success and the bonus, the plus on the fate die, that she is able to make out the details here. So statue 1 is pointing downward toward the middle of the room, and its inscription reads, "The light of day shines upon its supplicants." Statue 2 is pointing to statue 1, and its inscription reads, "The light of day shines upon my brother." Oh boy. All right, we have a riddle in the works here. Statue 3 is pointing west towards that hallway that we had scouted just a little bit. Its inscription reads, "The light of day gives way through the dark of night." Very spooky. Okay, so we have one pointing towards the middle of the room for supplicants, one pointing towards that first one for my brother, and then one pointing down that western hallway through the dark of night. I would say that that's pretty much that. Talls will take note of those things. As a mage, she is carrying scrolls, magic charms, I'm sure some kind of journal, notebook of sorts, so she's able to capture those notes. We're going to leave this room. We're going to head north through the busted down door. We'll be picking it up with section 1-3, the stone discs. I was driving yesterday one town to the next and playing out a little scene in my head to kind of flesh out our 4 squad members. So I am stoked to give some dialogue a try today. We'll see how that goes. For some reason, that fills me with a little bit of anxiety, but I kind of have the scene structured in my head already, and I just kind of want to play out the characters as their personalities kind of are starting to come out in my head, and obviously continue in the dungeon, the Rift of Seeping Night. I'm trying to think of, what's the history of my characters? What's the history of that brought them to this point? I have this overall concept that the squad is motivated by a recent loss of a 5th squad member. So we have the 4 squad members, Deadlock, Talls, Sax, and Sarge, but there was a 5th at one point, and one point recently, and the squad's still trying to get over that. So had some thoughts on that for today's game. We find the stewards, the squad, in a room that has 3 pointing statues, and again, they all have some writing on them. One, it says that the light of day shines upon its supplicants. Another one says the light of day shines upon my brother. And the third one says the light of day gives way through the dark of night. Our wizard, Talls, she's the one who is able to read those successfully and to decipher them. However, Sarge, they were in a hurry to go through a door to the north of this room and just smashed it to bits. It wasn't very solid, it turned out. As a result, we have a passageway that's been opened, but the characters are holding it back. And Sarge is actually going to say, whoa. Let's take a breath before we get too far in here. Talls, you took a tumble back there on our way in. How's it going? How you doing? And Talls reaches a delicate hand to her head and very lightly, with just a fingertip, touches a massive goose egg that's been rising ever since she took her fall through this staircase that opened beneath her feet at the entrance to this temple. As she does, and she flinches away from it because it is painful, and it's clear to everyone that she's got a bit of a head injury. Deadlock, our scout, speaks up and says, if Bellerophon were here, we wouldn't have to deal with any of that. Talls, you'd already be healed up. Our squad mage wouldn't have to worry about a head injury. And, I bet you if Bellerophon were here, and Sax speaks over Deadlock, he's not here. What don't you understand about that? We lost him. And the whole party goes silent for a moment. Sax continues, what right do we have here doing here anyways? What do we even know about this Baltothum? Why? And Sarge finally, just with the calmness that they bring to the squad, speaks up and says, we don't have much information, and we're not the ones that are deciding on what's right or wrong in this situation. We just, we've been given this task to, find the wizard, find Baltothum. Evidently, he's been an ally of the stewards this side of the dagger spine, and we don't have many allies over here. That's enough. Let's get moving. They head off to the north. 3 large stone discs are lying along the floor of this small corridor. Each disc is about 3 feet in diameter, 9 inches thick, and on the upward-facing side of each, a radial line is carved from center to edge. It does appear to be a pretty narrow hallway with a door that continues on to the north. Looking at it, I think I'm going to have Deadlock, who's my scout, and who was successful figuring out how to get us into the place in the first place. He's gonna scout, take the lead here. He still has a D8 for his scout stat, so I'm gonna roll D8 and a fate die. See what I get here. Okay, I rolled a 7, but I also rolled a negative. So Deadlock is able to decipher some of the basics about these 3 discs that are in this hallway. It looks like they, upon closer inspection, match the same material that the statues are made out of in that first area that we traveled through. They're about 3 feet in diameter, 9 inches thick, and on the upward-facing side of each, a radial line is carved from center to edge. So there's a way to kind of arrange these radial dials so that light can cast a shadow. Let's see, since we have Deadlock in the lead as scouts, I'm going to have him roll to see and examine these. Let's see what he gets. He has a scout D8. You know what? Actually, I'm picturing this as maybe more of a clever roll as he's examining. Scouting would have been maybe if he was just trying to decipher if the entire area was safe, but since he's in the lead and he's trying to be clever, examining these, kind of uses his smarts. Let's see what he gets. All right, I rolled a 3 and a plus. So that is a success plus some potential positive or bonus. So looking at these discs, Deadlock pull an arrow from his quiver. He has a quiver and a longbow. And he's going to kind of hold up the arrow to the disc, go walk back into the previous room with the 3 statues, hold up the arrow in the gap, the opening that's at the center of each statue, and kind of approximate, yeah, okay, wait a minute. Definitely, they're made of the same material. They look like they're the right size. And, I don't know. I don't know exactly how these are going to work, but there's three discs, 3 statues. That's a clue. Jinkies. So Deadlock explains this to the rest of the squad. Let's see. I'll have him and Sax. He'll pick up one of them. Sax will pick up the other 2, and they'll just lay them down at the foot of each of the statues. There's no real direction yet on what to do, and honestly, I don't think Deadlock is quite that clever. Talls is still recovering. If it was kind of something Talls might be able to help out with, I would say, yeah, let's jump in. Let's have her take a look too. But that gives them some ideas here of maybe a future puzzle or pieces of puzzle that they can continue to put together. So they'll continue north in this main hallway to find another door, and Sarge will delicately turn the knob. I don't know what kind of apparatus it has to open and close the door, but the latch is released. So we're going to open up into the next space. The interior of this strangely shaped room is absolutely glimmering with warm flickering lights glinting off the thousands of orange, red, and gold crystals embedded into the ceiling, floor, and walls of the gallery. Ooh, I'm lucky I don't have a thief character, because they would be just destroying this place, trying to capture all this loot. Along the walls, these meticulously crafted crystalline mosaics depict scenes of great battles between the same 2 armies. You also see 2 more doors, other than the one you just entered through. A large gold full-length mirror, a short alcove in the western wall, and at the end of a dark hallway branching off toward the east lies another large mirror, its obsidian frame nearly invisible in the gloom, save for the wreath of faint pinpricks of light sparkling in the shadows. And it says here, now upon further examination, I'm going to say Sarge is the one who is starting to study these. As Sarge, they have some history of military battles and some knowledge in that direction. Seeing clearly that the mosaics are depicting a series of great battles between forces of day and forces of night, and that's a pretty easy pattern, I would say, for anyone to pick up on. Forces of darkness, forces of light, and they're battling through the eons, each side occasionally looking more triumphant than the other, while the other one then can win the battle at a later date. So it's a very back and forth situation, like a weird art display, some kind of thing that they just stumble upon. Let's see, let's find out if any of these jewels that are in the walls here, if they're worth anything. Deadlock, whose main motivation is power, I'm going to have him again try to do some deciphering here and figure out what's going on. So let's roll his clever again, carefully inspecting, maybe taking, again, an arrow and taking the arrowhead and kind of getting it in between these weird gems and little beads and stuff that are in the wall itself. All right, rolled a 3 and a positive. So he is able to see that some of these jewels are actually worth a good chunk of change. And not that the stewards are all about the money or about getting rich, but they're pretty independent, and they're going to have to make their way through wilderness, through strange villages, and I think it's going to be worthwhile for the party as a whole to keep track of their wealth, just as a general relative resource that they have. Deadlock is taking time trying to decipher, which gems are valuable, what gems can be left. He's actually able to pull off about 100 gold pieces worth of gems, which I'm going to put in his inventory. If he can find a buyer, that's another story, but at least he's got some jingly-jangly gems hanging out in a pouch in his rucksack or something. All right, and then that brings us to now what's the rest of the party doing? So there's a couple of different features that can be all inspected, and I imagine that the squad is pretty used to inspecting a space and kind of immediately assessing passageways, routes, safety things, dangerous things. So what do I have here to look at? I have 2 doors other than the one that was to the south of the room that I entered through. One is a large gold full-length mirror In a short alcove in the western wall and at the end of a dark hallway branching off toward the east lies... so there's actually 2 mirrors and 2 doorways. Ooh, okay, that's a lot of different directions I can go. Looks like I have a mirror of light and a mirror of darkness. And starting with the gold mirror, actually, it appears that Deadlock, in inspecting the room, was able to decipher that that is actually worth something as well, but there's nothing really special about it. And it's also probably going to be too large to really remove from the wall and take with them. So he is going to continue to just kind of pick away at gems as he can. And there's a passageway to the east that looks to be pretty much a dead end with the obsidian mirror. Well, my characters aren't afraid of darkness, and this could be a gritty game. I don't think they're really going to inspect that obsidian mirror too closely either, after Deadlock was able to determine that the gold mirror really didn't have much going for it. So that leaves the 2 doors now to the north. One is on the left-hand side facing north, and one is on the right-hand side facing north. The left-hand side one has what appears to be a large 10-foot plank of wood, but that does look movable. You can have Sarge and Sax start to pull that down as Talls investigates the other doorway, which looks to be locked. There's a key opening, but none of my characters are really lockpickers. As I mentioned, I don't have any thieves, so I really don't have any like roguish characters per se. If I had a sapper in my group or like an engineer, that'd be the person that I would choose to take a look at this lock. But I don't have any keys. I haven't found anything yet. So that leaves the door with the 10-foot plank in front of it, and that is the path of least resistance. So that's the path that I'm going to take. The rules or the scenario doesn't call for even a die roll for this. It's literally just making the decision to move it. So the 2 characters that are working on that are able to do that without too much of a struggle. And then that will open up the next path to the north here. We'll just continue on this northern way and deeper further into the tunnel, or to the temple. In this area, the man-made construction of the hull gives way to a crude corridor bored through damp, solid rock. At the end of this corridor is a cave containing a fetid pool, bubbling with murky green sludge. A bucket bobs about in the ooze attached to a long chain rising up toward the unseen ceiling. Okay, well, there's not much in this space other than a gross pool of water, a bucket, a random bucket. I guess that's pretty much it. So we're gonna walk into this space. Since it's a newly discovered space, I would say that Deadlock is still going to take the lead here. Now we're going to roll Scout once more to see how we do. Okay, a 3 and a positive on Scouting. So luckily for me, and more so for my stewards, they're able to see that there's actually some creatures that are amongst this fetid pool of water. 3 pairs of globular eyes rise up from the depths, and they stare at Deadlock as Deadlock stares back at them and slowly draws an arrow from his quiver. Let's see. They don't look very threatening to start out with, and Sarge is actually going to put a hand on Deadlock's arm to hold him off from firing. And I'm going to have Talls roll Mage to see if she can figure out what's going on here with these creatures or whatever they might be. It's a D4 right now, so we'll see how well she does. I got a 3 and a neutral on my fudge die. With some quick thinking, and evidently through the foggy haze of this goose egg that's risen on her head, Talls is able to determine that if the creatures themselves aren't bothered, they're not going to bother the stewards. That's apparently what she's confident to say, and they will very carefully make their way through this room, careful to step around these little globulars and not bother them at all. I feel like this room smells bad. I was just remembering I should use some more descriptions of spaces, because the scenario obviously only gives you what you need to know to see in the room. But I figure this room seems like it had been blocked off with that big wooden plank intentionally. I don't know if it was Baltothum, not Bartholomew, Baltothum. If he did it himself, or if he had some servants do it, or what, who did it at what point. But evidently this room really doesn't constructed space like the rest of the temple is that I've seen. So as a result, I feel like this is dank, a lot of dripping noises, again, a bad smell, whatever these little globular monster things, the Glurbermerkers is what they're called in this scenario. That is a fantastic name. They are, in fact, poisonous, and I think, Talls would be able to decipher that as well, trying to check out what kind of creatures they are. The whole place probably just smells rancid and is not some place where you really want to get in a fight. It's also not very large space. It's pretty limited in what we're able to see. So we're going to continue on. It looks like looking at the map, there's a rather large hallway passage opening. It's not really a hallway as much as it is like a weird, dank, dark, like cleft in the rock itself. And I feel like we're kind of being plunged into darkness. So as a result, I'm going to have Talls pull out a magical charm, speak some words into, and get a little bit of light on the subject as my source of light. So we're no longer kind of in the realm of built, constructed temple that Baltothum presumably lives and studies in. We're now into some other space that's deeper into the mountainside itself. So it does look like there's a chain as well that can be used to climb into this, and further north on the passageway and further into the temple's depths. And so they're all going to have to do some climbing here. Let's see here. We'll have Sarge take the lead on this one just to keep things even, and we're going to have careful. Sarge is going to roll a careful roll to kind of set the tone for the rest of the squad to climb up this chain. So let's see what Sarge does. All right, Sarge rolled a 3 and a neutral, just enough to get them up the chain successfully. And as Sarge takes the lead here, there's a sound, and it sounds like this is actually quite a large opening. The path that they're climbing is just, like I said, a bit of a cutout of rock in this much larger cavernous. Seems like the ceiling is somewhere beyond where the light of Tall's charm can reach. There's a bubbling sound, very different from what was in that fetid pool room. It sounds like deep chanting somewhere in the depths of this space off to the left of where they're climbing, but they're going to continue to make their way. And so Talls is going to go next, and Talls is going to attempt to do it quickly, climbing up, feeling very uncomfortable with this space and whatever kind of dark presence is in here that seems to want to swallow up all of the light that tries to enter it. All right, we got a 7 and a negative, and I'll say as Talls quickly climbs up the chain, she does end up putting out her charm, which is not good. That's the negative result added on there. And so the whole area is kind of cast in darkness. Now, Sax and Deadlock are still in the fetid pool area. They're actually just past it because they all very carefully got through there. But now Sax and Deadlock are going to have to climb up in the darkness and try to catch up to Deadlock, and Sax will try to catch up to Talls and Sarge. So Deadlock will go next. Now that it's dark, he's going to try to do this sneakily. Ooh, a 2 and a negative. All right, so his sneaky is now down to a D6 and the negative. So at some point he's able to get up there, but it is slow going, and it is certainly not sneaky whatsoever. It's quite loud, in fact. Without the help of Talls' light charm, he's just scrambling up, and rocks getting loose and falling down behind him down this slight slope, and just kind of, it's going to make it not really a fun time for Sax to bring up the rear. But Sax is used to some trouble as the squad skirmisher. She's used to getting into the nitty gritty. So she's just going to try to like climb up quickly, get up the chain, and hopefully avoid the detection of whatever is in the deep wells of this cavern. All right, she is able to overcome it, and she seems to almost like push Deadlock up in front of her to get up to the next area. And as soon as they get up there, Talls is working on the light charm again to get it going, and they see a very slight glimmer of this charm, and Sarge gives them the sign to wait, to hold off, and puts a finger up to his lips to be quiet. The squad now stands in a large ovular stone plateau, rising high up from a seemingly bottomless pit below. There's a large well in the center of the plateau with a heavy crank mechanism attached to a chain that disappears down it. East of the well is a sundial and a translucent off-white orb laying on the ground nearby. At the far eastern precipice of the plateau, only about a foot away from the edge, spirals a huge, brilliantly illuminated shaft of water. To the west, there is a thin natural land bridge extending far into the darkness. All right, so we've made it to the plateau of the primordial well. Sarge had just gotten their marching orders, walking through Helenar City, the capital of the Empire, was looking for some direction. Didn't really make a lot of sense. They hadn't really ever been sent east of the Daggerspine Mountains, and there's not a lot out there. The stewards themselves are interested in reestablishing some connections to the eastern half of the continent. They're basically told to go explore, report back, and go help out where they can. There's a small settlement that has requested aid of the Empire, and this aid has actually it's pretty old. They've requested someone to come help them, and so finally the stewards, the organization, has decided to answer the call and has sent Sarge and their squad, even though they had just lost their chaplain, Bellerophon, under mysterious circumstances, I'll say. So Sarge is wandering Helenar City. It lives in the shadow of the Daggerspine Mountains. They're at a loss of what to do next. Obviously, they're going to follow orders. That's the job. Wandering, they cross the paths of the fortune teller, or a fortune teller's hut, really. That's just in one of these marketplaces of the city. It's a massive city. There's markets all over the place. The fortune teller, with a limp, walks up to Sarge as Sarge is just kind of glancing around, taking in the market, trying to see what they want to do next. And the fortune teller introduces herself. You look like someone who could use some assistance, perhaps. I don't want to presume. And you do look like a soldier. Would you like some guidance, some help? Sarge isn't even aware that they're being talked to, that this old lady is even addressing them to start with. And finally they look down at the lady. I guess sure, yeah. How much is this going to cost me? The old woman looks around and clutches her heart as if she's offended. Oh, for a steward, it won't be anything at all. Just please come into my tent and I will do a reading. My name is Poppy Ashwick. Sarge gives a quick head nod, follows her in, and sits down where motioned. The movements that Poppy begins as soon as she enters this tent and Sarge follows behind her are very precise, as if she now is kind of putting on a performance of sorts. Or maybe she was putting on a performance before. It's hard for Sarge to tell. The tent itself is it smells of cinnamon, and it is very warm, even though there's really no indication of a fire or anything like that. There are candles all over, but definitely not enough of a flame that would put Sarge into a position where they're already starting to sweat. But out of character here, I do plan on using, like I mentioned, this method, the Sosotris method. I'm going to choose to pronounce it in this little pamphlet that came with the King in Yellow tarot deck. Reading from the pamphlet here, it says that its most unusual aspect, it being the Sosotris method, its most unusual aspect is that the governing metaphor is that of a theatrical play and its elements, the script, the stage, the actor, and so on. This suggests that Sosotris had a background in the theater, although there is no information or even rumor to that effect. It also thematically aligns with the King in Yellow play, which is doubly curious, given that the deck was long rumored to exist before the play was ever published. I'm interested in incorporating the concept of the King in Yellow, and there's an Emperor card that clearly is the King in Hastur himself, their self, whatever itself is. Incorporating this concept of the King in Yellow into my own world, because it's kind of a nice transcendent, metaphysical, weird, creepy, unexplainable thing. There's already the concept of the Empire, the Helenar Empire, and I like the idea that this deck has existed much, much longer than the Empire. It's ancient, and it's just it exists in the world. So I'm going to incorporate that, and even though the world itself is slightly medieval, I think there's always been plays, going way back in history, and the idea of a play I think still fits in this world. Following the steps, first remove the Emperor card from the deck and set it aside, since it was not present in the original King in Yellow deck except under unusual circumstances. The instructions here encourage me to leave the version of the Emperor face up, right side up, off to the other side, as a show of respect befitting such a revered monarch. Poppy, as a fortune teller, does this with great reverence. Perhaps she even kisses the Emperor card, and then places it solemnly just off of the board to the side here. And she also lights a candle and places it right next to it so that the Emperor is constantly under flickering direct light. Second, the medium hands the deck to the querent. So in this case, as a solo RPG player and as a solo tarot reader, I am both the medium, Poppy Ashwick, as well as the querent, or the person that is being read to, who in this case is Sarge. As Sarge, I look at all the cards and choose one as my signifier, which is placed on the table at the top of the formation. The signifier represents Sarge's idea of the situation they are here to explore. It can be upright or inverted as the querent of the medium or the medium thinks best. So let's take a look through some of these cards here. All right, so after looking through the cards, I chose the number 9 card, which shows a warrior with sword and shield. We get to see behind the warrior facing a darkness that has what look like royal scepters that are crisscrossed in front, kind of forming almost like a chain link fence. And then there are red eyes peering from the darkness at the warrior. I don't know. This just spoke to me. And trying to put myself in Sarge's shoes right now, not knowing what their direction is and being forced to go kind of out into the unknown, that's the one I chose. And so, like I said, I'm going to post a picture of the whole reading after it's all done, because there's a diagram in the pamphlet of how it should be laid out. So I'm excited to see kind of like the image that I produce when it's all said and done. Sarge puts this down without a word, without explanation. Poppy doesn't ask any questions, doesn't follow up with anything. Third, the trickiest and most crucial part, the selection of the ineffable card. The medium shuffles the deck face down and then cuts it as you would a deck of playing cards. The bottom card of the upper half of the cut deck is flipped, so it now faces up, but retaining its normal or reversed orientation, and it was returned to its place. This manipulation must be conducted with neither the medium nor the querent seeing its face. The ineffable has been chosen, and myself, both as Poppy and Sarge, have no idea, as the directions explained, which card was picked. So now I have a deck containing or comprising 76 face-down cards and 1 face-up card. This unusual card is known as the ineffable, and its nature and meaning are not for the living to see or understand. Rather, it is meant for any unseen observers in attendance at the reading. Poppy does this, and she explains, "No, do not look, do not look." And Sarge begrudgingly covers their face with their hand. And while Sarge isn't looking, Poppy is shuffling. She very carefully cuts the deck and actually puts the 2 halves side by side, and then she pulls out a linen cloth and ties it around her eyes, around her head to conceal her eyes, and then she finally takes the action to flip the bottom card on the top half to be face up, places it back where it was, and rebuilds the deck as if it was not cut in the first place. She continues to wear the mask, and she says, "It is done." Sarge looks up and is a little startled. It's hard now to make out the features of Poppy, whereas before she just looked like an old woman, fortune teller, jangly medals all tied into her scarf and everything. Now she seems like otherworldly. Fourth, the 2 halves of the deck are recombined and then flipped over and shuffled face up, so the ineffable card may migrate freely face down without its identity being revealed. Still without looking at the deck, Poppy does such an action. The deck has been shuffled and placed back face down. Now the medium, Poppy, begins to deal from the bottom of the deck. Okay, the deck has been shuffled, and it actually appears that it should be left face up, which is fascinating. And you deal from the bottom of the deck. As I flipped it over, I swear to the yellow king in yellow, that the ineffable card is actually now, it's at the top of my deck with all the other cards face up. This is the one card that's face down. That is really kind of neat, actually. Anyways, I'm going to be dealing out 12 cards face up from the bottom of the deck into the pattern that's laid out in this pamphlet. The cards should be laid out in order from 2 to 13. If the ineffable card is dealt, it will already be face down, and it must stay so, even when laid out for the reading. That card may not be seen by the living. When the reading is concluded, the card should be restored to its normal facing and shuffled into the deck, yet again without anyone seeing what it was. This is awesome. It is teasing me by being on the top of my deck. I cannot look at it, though. Poppy would not look at it. She's one of the living. So I need to deal out 12 cards now, face up in the order from the very bottom of the deck that's displayed here in the diagram. So I'm going to do that now. All right, I'm going to make this look super cool. I've never participated in a tarot reading. I've certainly never done one. But just laying all these out, I'm just like, ooh, what does this mean? What does that do? I have no idea. We'll continue, because now that I have my diagram, my field of cards, the pamphlet's going to continue to tell me how to interpret and read these things as Poppy has laid out the cards, and again with great reverence, and still with this linen-y cloth over her face to conceal her features and her eyes. She now is kind of her hands are just roving over the field without touching or making contact with any of the cards. If the ineffable card is not among those drawn for the reading, the medium should find it in the deck and place it face down and unseen, covering the signifier, where it represents an unknowable influence upon the life of the querent. Well, that's easy to find. It's the top card. So I've put it face down on top of my first card, which I described earlier with the darkness, the warrior, the scepters forming a fence, and the red eyes burning in the distance. That card's now covered by my ineffable card. Poppy does this very quickly, very practiced, and Sarge looks up at her and they say, whoa, why that? What's going on there? Poppy looks upon the void in front of her and says, this is the ineffable's influence upon the reason you're here, the choices that you've made. Sarge doesn't know what to make of that. They feel kind of dehumanized, I guess is the way you'd say that, as if their decision on why they're here in the first place, what made them follow Poppy into this dark intent, that it's just as if it is inconsequential. Finally, the medium interprets the reading. The drawing order and the roles of the cards are as follows. So I already placed the ineffable over the signifier. That's the first card. It's the card chosen by Sarge to suggest the situation. So we'll go through these now one at a time as they are examined by Poppy. Card number 2 is the mask. This is how the Sarge presents themselves to others. Ooh, I like this. The card is the number 7, and it's a woman in a red dress, and she appears to me to be juggling, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these same scepters that were depicted as a fence in the signifier card. That's a woman. That's how, interestingly, Sarge, who I basically have decided is non-binary, but Sarge is presenting to others as maybe as more of a feminine aspect, but definitely I'm most interested in the juggling of these 7 scepters, as if they're always trying to juggle too many responsibilities potentially, or too many conflicting demands. Number 3 is the performance, the events and other factors immediately around the situation. This is good too. This is really, I can see why tarot is fun, because the second card here, the performance, is the number 10. It looks to be like a courtly scene or a scene of leisure for many nobles, children included, and they're eating, they're lounging about. It looks to be like a palace apartment or something like that, and I can definitely see. So Poppy looks at this and says, "There's much going on in the empire, or something, or some organization above you. Then it just seems to be influencing everything that you're doing." And Sarge's eyes go dark, and they look down, but no verbal response is given. Number 4, the audience, the people immediately surrounding the situation. Well, this is bleak. This is the number 1, and it is a decapitated head, what looks to be on a gold platter, kind of John the Baptist style. Also looks like it's a giant coin. The head looks ancient. The eyes are glowing. Poppy looks at it and says, "Oh, I don't know if that's a person or if that's an entity or what it might be, but this person, entity, creature perspective seems to be surrounding whatever it is that you bring in with you to the tent." Number 5, the unconscious, the inner nature of the querent or Sarge as it relates to the situation. This inner nature, it's number 20. It's Le Jugement, I'm guessing the judgment. And this is interesting. It looks like a hall, a feasting hall, again with nobles, finely dressed individuals. A table, the feasting table has been pushed over, all of the food knocked off from a red tablecloth, and everyone is looking out a window into the night. Well, it looks like the inner nature has gone or has escaped. Poppy looks to Sarge, her head lifting towards the steward, and says, "Your inner nature seems to be vacant. It seems to have left and seems to be perhaps sought after by others." Number 6, the actor, how the querent or Sarge perceives themselves as relates to the situation. I like this card a lot too. It's number 8, and it looks to be like a craftsman or a worker, all dressed in white. He looks like he's got a beard, pounding engravings into what look to be the same exact type of gold plate or large coin that the head from number 4, the audience, that beheaded creature, their head is laying upon. And there's 8 of these such platters hanging on the wall behind this craftsman. I like this idea a lot. Sarge maybe has been... I established earlier that Sarge is probably older, probably has been working with the military for a long time, maybe has only recently made the move to the Steward Lodge and started working with that organization within the Empire. Maybe it was because of this perception that they're just there to continue mechanically working in the world and working in the Empire, even though there doesn't seem to be much purpose of it. It's propping up this decapitated head of the Empire, potentially. Number 7, the script. The factors that brought the situation to its present state. And I'm not going to be able to pronounce this because, of course, it's in French, but it's Reine de Coupe, Coupe. I don't know what this means, but it kind of looks like it could be like, I'm not even going to guess. What the image is looks like a red body of water, and we get a woman, looks like a queen. Oh, Queen of Cups. I figured it out in real time. I speak French now, I guess. It looks like it's a queen holding up a cup, a chalice, a gold chalice, but she's mostly submerged underwater. You can see her crown, you can see her blonde hair. And I shouldn't say water, it's liquid. To me, it looks like it's probably meant to be wine. Of course, red liquid. It could be blood. She could be floating in a pool of blood. So let's see. What was this supposed to be? Factors that brought the situation to its present state. It looks like a regent to queen, king, empress, emperor, who maybe has just gotten lost in their cups, so to speak, or swimming in a pool of blood, absently not paying attention to it all. Again, this is creating quite an image of a bleak empire. Clearly the downfall era of an empire, or at least that's how Sarge feels about their work within the military as a steward, potentially, that at the top there doesn't seem to be anyone. There's just, it's late stage capitalism. Ta-da! That's what the Helenar Empire seems to be representing by this reading, at least from Sarge's perspective. Number 8, the stage. The backdrop of the situation. This concerns factors less visible than the performance, but sometimes more crucial. This is also a number 1, and there is a image of a moon with a sword that's thrust through it, completely through it, with the pointy end sticking out the other side. Factors less visible than the performance, but sometimes more crucial. Poppy looks down and tries to interpret this image. Is there an ulterior motive to the Empire that you're sensing, that you perhaps see as a threat to a greater existence? It's difficult to say. It's difficult to read. Sarge gasps slightly and files that away without giving any response. Number 9, the unexpected, a surprise that lies in wait. This is one of the creepiest cards. I think it might actually be the creepiest card. Number 10, and it is an image of what look to be 5 men, all with yellow eyes. It actually kind of looks like the same platter that the craftsman is making and that this head was floating on. Little tiny miniature coin-sized versions of this platter in place of the eyes of all 5 of these men. There's a red wavy background behind it, but all 5 men stare back at you, stare at Sarge directly. Sarge feels the weight of that presence, of that observation, and it is unsettling to them. All right, number 10, the rising action. The next phase of the situation is not too encouraging for Sarge. Poppy looks and says, 12, le pendu, Pendu. And I don't know, it looks like a herald, a royal herald who's tied up by his feet, hanging upside down from what could also be like a place that you might hang someone to death just out in the country. The herald does look bemused. There's also a horseshoe sitting on the ground there, but that's the next phase, and Sarge is really unhappy about this. They feel like, so we're just going to be left out to dry, basically. That's what my card is telling me. That's what's going to happen to us next. Number 11, fate, that which cannot be changed. It is the number 1 card again, and it shows apparently a boy balancing a huge golden chalice. Looks very similar to the one the Queen of Cups is holding, but it's massive. The boy is balancing this chalice upon his head. Sarge thinks to themselves, there is an heir to the Empire. Perhaps that's what we need to look to. There's always going to be someone there until there isn't. But right now we need to focus. Perhaps this princeling that we have is who we need to focus on and who we need to continue on for. The revelation is the next card, that which will be revealed. I don't know how to interpret this one. It's a number 2. It is a person with 2 faces, each drinking from this same chalice, apparently the same chalice that's in the other pictures that I've seen so far. That which will be revealed. So it's a 2-sided character, 2-faced character, both drinking from the same chalice. Perhaps, Poppy says, perhaps you have a sense that there is someone not quite trustworthy, or someone who's not presenting themselves as they would in reality, hiding something. Or perhaps it's you. You may be the one who is hiding something. It's lucky that it's dark in here in this tent, because Sarge apparently blushes at this observation, but continues not saying anything or responding. The denouement, the final outcome of the situation, and this is ominous, I'll say. It's the number 3, and it's 3 swords all pointing towards the center, forming a triangle with a red background. That's the final outcome of the situation, is that it will come to swords. Poppy, when her hand floats above this final card, she flinches back as if she doesn't want to acknowledge it. The denouement, the final outcome, is one of apparently violence, and violence that the outcome of it is unknown and is unknowable until we've reached that point. Poppy finally pulls the linen from her face, looks at what she's created, what she's placed out in front of Sarge, and says, "I'm sorry. I didn't know this would be the case. I wish you all of the best luck you can have for this world, and that you will peacefully reach your bridge someday." Sarge tips her a coin without saying anything, and they leave the tent. As they sit within the dungeon of Sleeping Night, Sarge remembers back on this reading, this moment, and contemplates, thinks about what has brought them to this dark, terrible, harrowing experience of this dungeon, wondering why they even followed through on the assignment in the first place, and looks around to see the rest of the squad's not doing too great either. Deadlock, Talls, and Sacks, and they wonder how they're going to get through this. Where I left off before, our 4 stewards of the Halinar Empire, Sarge, Sacks, Deadlock, and Talls, they are pretty deep into this wizard, the wizard Baltothum's temple, his study area, his mansion, his apartments, whatever you want to call it. And it being a wizard's place, there's obviously weird, quirky things that they've encountered, but they've made their way up through what ended up being the passageway that led upwards into a well that they climbed a chain, but it was harrowing, we'll say that, because there's a massive sea of darkness, and was just off to their left as they climbed this chain, and then appeared up onto this plateau above the sea of darkness. I'm going to read a description here of the plateau of the primordial well. The stewards now stand on a large ovular stone plateau, rising high up from a seemingly bottomless pit below. There is a large well in the center of the plateau, with a heavy crank mechanism attached to a chain that disappears down it. Again, this is what my characters just climbed out of. East of the well is a sundial, and a translucent off-white orb laying on the ground nearby. At the far eastern precipice of the plateau, only about a foot away from the edge, spirals a huge, brilliantly illuminated shaft of water. To the west there is a thin natural land bridge extending far into the darkness. The stewards now are taking a moment. Sarge did have their flashback to that tarot reading from last episode, as they just kind of gather their thoughts, and the stewards have moved a little bit slowly, a little bit intentionally through this, and I think a lot of that comes from the fact that they did lose Bellerophon, who was basically their chaplain for their squad priest, and they're all still coping with that loss, with that trauma. None of them are too eager to get into the next fight, cross some danger that they don't need to cross. Talls, as squad mage, she is looking around and she checks out the sundial. And there's an inscription along the edge of the sundial that reads, "The light of day shines upon its supplicants." And this is a recurring theme. That's also a quote from one of the statues that they ran into earlier. The whole temple and the city of Spire itself, or this little village of Spire, I should say, in the mountains, they worship the sun. They're worshippers of lights. Something has gone wrong. Talls is starting to get a terrible feeling that where the hell did Baltothum go? Why has he been missing for so long? And why was there this great spiraling, whirling well of darkness that they had to cross to get up into this plateau in the first place? And then she looks around and she notices that none of them, including herself, are looking off to the west. And the west leads to a very thin land bridge. And I'm picturing kind of like the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, that kind of a thing. But it would take them directly over this black, spirally, oily chasm of nothingness, and none of them are looking in that direction. One of the other exciting updates, exciting to me at least, is that I switched over to Karn. I probably should have mentioned that earlier. I rolled up some characters, stats I should say, for my characters that already exist using the Karn Second Edition Player's Guide. And so I'm going to make a roll here. Talz specifically is trying to force herself to look in the direction of this dark cavern. And so using Karn, kind of interpret this as a save check. Using Will as a kind of obvious one here to force herself. She has a stat of 12, and so I'm going to roll a d20. In Karn, if I get a 12 or lower, then it's successful. I rolled a 15. So she thinks to herself, I have to look over there. But she can't. She kind of averts her face, and she walks over to Sarge and taps them on the shoulder. We got to get out of here, Sarge. Sarge, still lost in that memory of the tarot reading, shakes it off, and they look at Talz. What are you talking about? And Talz puts herself between Sarge and the chasm, but facing away from the chasm. I think we need to get out of here now. Deadlock, who I kept their motivations, and Deadlock's motivation is power. He picks up this orb that was on the ground. It's a translucent off-white orb, and he pockets it, and he tries to look in the direction. So he's east of them, of the two of them that were talking. He tries to look in the direction and finds that it's also a struggle to just even face that direction. I'm going to have Deadlock roll Will as well, and he has a 14. Ooh, I rolled a 1. That's a critical success. I'm going to choose to I don't know if it's actually a critical success, but yeah, it's a 1. Rolling low in Karn is good. So I rolled a 1. Deadlock has this orb. I don't know if it's the orb itself that fills him with courage, or feels like he can press forward, but he looks in their direction, and his eyes go large, and even though he's looking into this vast darkness that's directly behind Sax and Talz, his pupils contract as if it's so bright, but there's nothing to see there at all. And he's starting to hear something like a whirling sound. Almost sounds like a weeping noise, like crying and mourning is in mourning. And as he slides the translucent orb into his backpack, his rucksack that he's carrying on his back, he looks up and says, does anyone else hear that? And Talz looks at Sarge again and says, we need to leave now. Sarge now for the first time is going to look up and also try to look at Talz, who again is between them and the orb, or them and the sphere of darkness, this sea of darkness that they're starting to realize is kind of starting to move into this space. They're all getting this feeling. And Sarge has a will of 13. Rolled a 13, so we just got it. It's equals or less then. Sarge looks up and nods without speaking and stands up, instinctively pulling their longsword kind of loose in the scabbard to make sure that it's ready if they need it. Finally, Sax looks around as well and is going to attempt to look in the direction of where everyone else is. And Sax has an 8 willpower. I rolled a 15 again. Sax starts to slowly move and like kind of slide away from this cliff edge where the darkness is. Doesn't try to draw any attention to herself. She's kind of sneaking away. As she's doing so, her motivation was grief. She starts to hear the mourning and the crying, and it definitely speaks to her. She's pulled back towards the darkness in this space that seems to be encroaching, and even as Sarge and Talz and Deadlock all seem to be backing away, where once Sax was moving away, she starts to make her way without being able to like see what she's moving towards. She's still drawn towards it, and she believes that the crying, this mourning sound, sounds very familiar. It could be, in fact, Bellerophon. There's something in it that makes Sax think that it's Bellerophon who's crying, and he's lost in this darkness. We have to go in there. All 3 of the other stewards look at Sax and are shocked. All 3 of them have been like, no, we got to get out of here. Let's go back down in this well, climb down this chain. Let's get out. Wizard be damned. Baltathum is lost. That's what they're all kind of thinking together, is like, this mission is going bad real quick. But Sax, without hesitation and without looking, leaps off of the ledge of this plateau and into the darkness. As she's leaping, Sarge is going to reach out and try to make a quick grab, hold her back, and I'm going to use a strength save on this, and Sarge has a 12 strength. Rolled a 10. So as Sarge grabs Sax and pulls her away from this darkness, I'm going to have Sax actually roll a resisting strength. And so she has a 9, whereas Sarge is 12, and I roll a 10 for Sarge. If I roll a 10 or lower, I'm going to say that Sax, or actually it have to be a 9 because a 10 would be a fail. So if I roll any success for Sax, her success is going to be lower than Sarge's, which is a more powerful success. We'll see what happens. Rolled a 17. So Sax is definitely pinned down by Sarge, and Sarge kind of shakes her and says, "What are you doing? Get a hold of yourself." And Deadlock starts to hear the mourning as well, and the grief noise that's coming up from this darkness. And the darkness now has moved into half of the room. It's actually overtaken the well itself. The room gets all of a sudden completely covered in darkness. Deadlock, who had grabbed the orb, he's the only point of light, and it's coming from his rucksack. Talls quickly just grabs the orb out from his backpack, and it's, again, the only source of light. And they, now with the orb out, they can see a small space around them, but there's no features in this space anymore. And all of a sudden, they look down, and they can hear their footsteps, or there's a small level of water that has filled this space. But this space itself there's no walls. There's just no dimension exactly to this space. It's just a huge open cavernous area, which is just completely changed from where they just were. And they all hear the mourning sound. They all hear what sounds to be now kind of quieting, whimpering. They have no idea what to do. And Sarge looks over to Talls, who's holding that orb, and it's glowing, and says, "Well, what do you think? We go towards the mourning, towards the crying, or we go away from the crying? Those are our two options that I can see. I'm open to suggestions. Anyone see anything else that we can do?" And Sarge is whispering, and the whisper goes not very far at all. It's hushed almost immediately, and they can barely hear them. Talls just walks forward and hands Sarge the orb and says, "You're the boss. Boss, you tell us what to do." And Sax, again, now free from Sarge's grip, starts to walk towards the mourning, the whimpering, the crying sound that's in front of them. And the water is just like the only noise that anyone can hear as Sax sloshes her way through. Quickly, Sarge catches up to her, and Deadlock and Talls follow them. And they start walking towards, and they can see a brief, like a glimpse of an outline of a figure who's sitting, looks to be on finally some kind of a little bit of a feature of like a sandbar in the middle of a vast body of water that's only a little bit deep, maybe up to 6 inches at times, and it's unsteady. But other than that, it's just a black morass that surrounds them. Again, the orb is glowing. It's the only source of light that they have with them, and it does not reach very far. They approach this figure, and it seems to be robed with a hood drawn over it. There's just no features other than, like, it could just be a rock essentially on top of another rock, or a log or something like that. But they walk towards it. Suddenly, for the first time that they've been able to see, this thing moves as if it's caught them moving towards it, and they've caught its attention. So it looks at them from across an expanse that actually seems to be shrinking, even though they're not really moving closer to this entity. And a voice that none of them recognizes says, "I've been waiting for someone for so long to come." I've been thinking a lot about what's going to happen next. We left out a bit of a cliffhanger in the last session, and I was very excited to think of what that could mean. The very thing that you need to illuminate a space or to give context is light to a darkness, and the darkness is the thing that swallows the light up. That may be a bit of a theme. As I've been playing through the Rift of Sleeping Night, it has been definitely a major thing to explore of how this small mountain village of Spire has been traditionally a light worshipping place, but their immortal wizard Baltothum who's supposedly been studying the light, seems to be lost in his own home. And so that's what brought the stewards to come help and try to reestablish the connection of their organization with Balto Thum on this side of the mountains. And that's where they got lost at the end of the last session. Had an opportunity. I took a picture of the 2-page spread for rolling up like lich details. Wanted to, just behind the scenes, like as a solo role player, have some randomness and something that was outside of my control as far as what this character is. And I wouldn't exactly just refer to him as a lich. He's not exactly a lich, but approximately he's lichy. And so I used monstrous, hashtag lichspiration, and use that to give my character here some more interesting details, and then combining that with the specifics from Karn. I don't know how to pronounce it actually, but the rule system I'm using, I have the bestiary now, which I picked up off Amazon for like $3. It's a great deal, and I pulled the lich stats out of there to help me also get an idea of what this character that we're encountering, what they might be capable of. So it helped me really come up with some cool ideas, and this is not a guy you want to mess with. I shared a picture of what the stats were, and I love Karen because I'll read the stats, all of the stats of this character. 18 hit points, or hit protection as it's called in this game. 1 armor, an 18 will save, an attack of a soul dagger that does d8 damage, an ability to cast spells without consequence, so without gaining any fatigue. So that alone, this character will be constantly casting spells if ever finding themselves in a combat, messing things up for whoever its enemies are. And then a critical, so if an attack from this character reduces the hit protection of another character below 0, I believe is when a critical happens, and that will, for this character, paralyze its target. That's with the Soul Dagger. And then the other big ability is that it has 2d6 random spell books or spells that it can cast, again, without consequence. So I rolled 2d6. I got 9 rolled up in the Cairn, the first edition rulebook, just 9 random spells. So I've got some real clear abilities that it's capable of doing. Of course, my stewards don't know any of this, so being able to differentiate player knowledge versus character knowledge is like fundamental to the experience here. But that's the character as solo RPG GM I was able to roll up, and he has a couple other cool abilities, I think, as a result of Monstrous, the random attributes of a lich that you can roll up. This is a really cool character, and I wouldn't necessarily even call him like a big bad by any means. He might actually be an ally, but definitely a big character, a big NPC is able to quite hold its own if worse were to come to worse. Coming across this figure of robed darkness, it greeted them and beckoned them and mentioned that it's been so long since it had been waiting for someone to come and greet it. That's where we begin. So Deadlock is roughly the ranger of the group. He's holding this off-white pale orb, and it's the only thing that's casting light in this whole space. None of their torches seem to light. No fire seems to light. Tal's has a light charm, and it won't seem to go either. So literally it's just this one orb that Deadlock is carrying. Come and approach my playing field. The board is waiting. The other 3 stewards all look at Sarge, and they're not quite sure what to do either. Within the light of the orb, Sarge is able to make out that there actually are a few features, or one main feature, I should say, upon this creature's face underneath its hood. And Sarge is able to see glimmering in the light, reflecting from the orb that Deadlock is carrying, that the creature does have a mouth. The mouth is moving. Its lips are black. Its teeth are also black and reflecting a wetness about them, which is really the only way that Sarge is able to make out that the creature is moving at all, almost. And Sarge decides to come closer, and the creature, with just one robed hand or arm appendage, whatever it might be, because it's just completely covered in dark. The cloak itself that it's wearing has a slight shimmer to it, as if it's almost darker than the darkness around it. Again, this is all because of the orb, that they're able to see any of it. and it makes a sweeping motion. And right behind it, Sarge now can see that there's a small table in the middle of this dark space, and there are 2 stools. All of this is, again, darkness, black. Everything is carved in like an onyx and ebony. The table itself seems to be a board of some kind, and it's covered in these little intricate, almost like chess pieces, but there's such a large variety that Sarge is looking at it, trying to come up with some semblance of what is this. It's clearly there for a purpose, but what is its purpose? And they aren't able to draw any kind of conclusion about what the pieces. There's no rhyme or reason. What could the pieces be doing? The entity continues to point towards one of the stools, and Sarge sits down. The other 3 all stand around behind Sarge, and the entity sits down across from them. Please, make a move. The entity points towards the board. Sarge thinks, and there's no distinction between any of the pieces. Looking at the board, it's clear that there's something here to be done. There's some strategy, some greater tactical decision that could be made, but there's just no rhyme or reason. There's not even a distinction between what might be Sarge's pieces and what might be this creature's. And Sarge is at a complete loss, is just sitting there in thought. And suddenly Sax speaks up, and she says, we're looking for someone, and we've heard, all of this seems crazy, but it feels like we've heard him in the distance crying. The creature looks at Sax, essentially no eyes, but the face turns to face Sax and says, you hear crying here. That's very interesting. Do the rest of you, what do all of you hear here? Talls and Deadlock look at each other and shrug. Sarge finally is able to snap out of the confusion and says, we've all heard it. Who are you? What is this place? The creature looks up and says, well, I used to be known by one name, and now I have another. More of a title, you see. I have no idea how much time has passed for you. I've been here, but it seems like lifetimes. The 4 stewards kind of just exchange glances. Sarge speaks up. Well, what used to be your name? I forget. It's been so long. It was something. I served as an expert. I studied. I was credited with great knowledge. Talls speaks up. Was it Baltothum, maybe? And the creature nods slowly and says, that could be. But now, that is no longer my name. Now I am known as Midnight. Talls seems really interested in this. Midnight, that's a weird name. How did you find yourself here, and where exactly is here? And the creature makes a move on the table and moves a piece, and Sarge is bewildered. Still thinking, still observing, trying to get a sense of what's going on in this massive strategic playing field. We are in the Bridge of Darkness, and that catches all of their attention. Bridges are what, in this world, are kind of the transition from death and this current life. You walk your bridge, and you move through your bridge to find what comes next. And so it's kind of a purgatory land. To be in a bridge is very unusual. It's not a good thing to find yourself kind of walking the lands of the dead. But even more so, Talls is alarmed by this. What do you mean the Bridge of Darkness? Sarge looks over at her. What's wrong? Talls, spit it out. There is no Bridge of Darkness, Talls says. It's not a real place. I've never heard of it. And the squad is looking to Talls because bridges are also the source of magical power. It's where they being mages, wizards, siphon energy off of and pull power from, and they all have some kind of alignment. Talls happens to be aligned with the Bridge of Fire, and that tends to flavor what kind of magic you're casting. But Talls just looks at the other 3 and says, this isn't a real place. I don't know who that is, but are you part of the court? Can this be real? And she's starting to panic. I'm going to have her make a will check, and her will is 12. Let's do a d20 roll here. 13. She's starting to lose it. She is not having it. As she starts to panic, actually, the other 3 of them are all going to notice that there's something real wrong. If their squad mage is having such a not good situation that they're approaching, they're all freaking out too. So we're going to start with Sarge to make a will check, a will save. 11, and I needed a 13. So Sarge is keeping it under control as best as they can. Oh, I rolled a 20 for Sax. She's lost it. She only has an 8 will to begin with, but that 20, that's a critical failure. Sax falls to her knees. Sarge immediately goes down to her and to kind of hold her in place, try to keep her from falling into this water. Shallow as it is, it's still possible to drown in it. She starts just kind of murmuring to herself that if Bellerophon were here. She seems to be lost in her grief. Deadlock will also roll. 13 out of 14. Deadlock's able to keep himself situated. He tries to start to comfort Talls, and Talls just isn't having it. Laughing more to itself. Midnight. He's bemused even, by the reaction to this news. He looks over to Deadlock. Deadlock's still holding that light orb and says, "Please, may I see that trinket?" Deadlock does not look excited about that, and Sax groans in mourning for Bellerophon. "Would you stop that already?" And with a snap, Sax disappears. In her place, a goat, which Sarge is now holding a goat. It's the strangest thing. They fall back away from this goat. The three of them are looking on in terror as Sax has been replaced by this goat, and Midnight pulls a small obsidian dagger from somewhere within the robe sleeve of his left hand, and with his right hand quickly moves to slit the throat of this goat. Blood sprays from its throat as if it's a sacrifice, and the three of them look on in terror and shock. "I just needed silence. I lose myself sometimes. You," and he looks back at Deadlock, who now is barely holding on to himself. "You have the will to resist me?" And he's going to make another check to see, does he have the will to resist? And he does. "What are you talking about?" Yes, bring our friend back." No. This is the Bridge of Darkness. We are all on our own." And he continues to keep his gaze on Deadlock while Sarge is stunned, unable to move, and Talls is trying to regain her composure. Deadlock is the only one who's kind of standing there unstunned comparatively to the other two, and he's holding this orb, and it starts to glow hot, and it's their only source of light. And he's starting to get a little unnerved by the fact that it's glowing warm, and he's not sure what to do. Midnight is extremely intent on keeping Deadlock locked in to his line of sight. "You impressed me. I have gifts to give. You seem to be worthy, more than anyone here, and more than anyone I've seen since coming to this place." And he looks up. Midnight looks up. Deadlock, looking just over and beyond, swears that he sees movement. Vast shape, covered possibly in fur or feathers or something, dwarfing what Deadlock thought could be existing in this space. It really gives him a different perception beyond what he was thinking this dark, cavernous space could hold, and realizing that there may truly be no limits. Midnight shudders and says, yes, there are many gifts to be had here. Would you care to join me and receive my gifts? Deadlock looks down at Sarge. Sarge is just shaking, shuddering now with what they've seen happen, and Talls as well. Talls is now on her knees, and she's just holding herself, and Deadlock looks to Midnight and slowly nods and says, I will accept your gift. Midnight holds out his hand, and Deadlock knows that the creature in front of him wants the orb. He takes a step forward and puts the orb into Midnight's hand, and immediately The orb goes out. Darkness surrounds them. It engulfs them. It swallows them whole. Sarge and Talls are shivering, an icy grip upon every aspect of them, physically, their soul, their emotions, and a great rumbling and a sound of rushing water like nothing they've ever heard. Off in the distance, it seems to be echoing all around them, and they get washed away. They wake up. Their whole body feels bruised, battered, but they're in a bed. They seem to have bandages covering several parts of their body, but there's sunlight. Sarge just feels pure relief, cannot believe that there's light again in the world. Looks around and realizes that they're actually in a room with walls and a ceiling and a floor and a window where the sun shines through. Oh, I didn't think you'd wake up. It's the old druid, the one who welcomed them in Desfire in the first place. He sits at a chair by Sarge's bed, offers them a glass of water, which Sarge drinks gratefully. Sarge looks over and sees Talls is in the next bed, not stirring, but not in any clear distress, just as battered and bruised as they are, looking for any kind of answer. They look back to the druid. I'm so sorry for what you've been through. I don't know what happened in the apartments of Baltothum, but there's much to be done. Much has happened in the weeks that you've been missing. I have many questions for you. Sarge has woken up, and Sarge is starting to gain an appreciation of what happened while they were basically presumed missing, presumed dead for what seems to be several weeks, as far as Solgren the Elder Druid has shared. It is morning. The sun is shining through the window. There's a sound of knocking, repetitive knocking, metal on metal noise that can be heard. A blacksmith's fire is being clearly lit and fueled. You can hear the bellows working and increasing the sound of the fire, and Talls wakes up to the sound, and she's looking around, or rather trying to look around. She raises a hand to her face and realizes that her eyes are covered with some light gauze, and it casts the whole world in a white aura, and she goes to remove the gauze, and someone says in the room, wait, just a moment, wait. Talls thinks that she recognizes the voice, but it sounds different. It sounds changed in some way. And she realizes as deft hands start to pull away the gauze very slowly that there's actually a couple of soft linen pads that have been placed over her eyelids as well underneath the gauze. And deft hands are removing the gauze and the little pads. She starts to open her eyes, and she feels like she's been in the worst bar fight that she could ever imagine. Bruised all over. She can feel a bandage on her left hand. Both of her eyes feel like she's gotten some pretty good punches in to her face, some black eyes. But she opens them up, and she sees Sarge, actually, who's the one who hands that have seen some bitter battles and some rough work. Talls sees that it's Sarge who's removing and taking really, really careful care of Talls' eyes. He's not removing her eyes, removing the pads from her eyes. What happened? Talls is still trying to get oriented. That kind of incessant banging in the background of metal on metal is happening. Sarge looks down and says, I think I lost them, Talls. Lost who? Talls says. Sarge sits back in the chair that she's sitting in next to Talls' bed, and this is the same room where Sarge found themselves waking up earlier. Deadlock and Sax, the squad. Talls were the only ones who made it. What do you mean? Who made it? We're the only survivors? Sarge sits in silence for a moment. The door actually opens up behind them, and in walks Solgren, the elder druid. Talz feels like she recognizes the druid, but really it's been quite some time, more time than she thought it had been, and she's trying to gain an understanding of what Sarge actually meant when Sarge stands up and says, "She's all right. She'll live. I'm ready to go." Talz looks over and says, Go. What are you talking about, Sarge?" And Sarge just walks out of the space, and the druid sits down next to Talz and says, "You need to take it easy. You've been through quite a bit. I'm not even sure that you'll be able to use that hand again." And he points to Talz's left hand. She tries to move her thumb, and her hand just shakes. She can't even make a fist with it. One of the things that I did between sessions here was to roll for both of the characters to have scars. In Cairn, when a character loses exactly the amount of hit points that they have from a single attack, then they have the opportunity to gain a scar if they survive. Both Sarge and Talz have survived. And so looking at the chart here, I was able to roll extra hit points for Sarge. So Sarge went from 3 to 6 hit points. And then Talz, who had more hit points to begin with, had a worse scar as a result of losing all of them. And so she had a chance to re-roll through this table her will stat. And if it was higher, she could take the second result. And I rolled a 13 and she had a 12. So I was able to increase it by 1. So they both have been through quite a bit. I've also taken the chance to re-roll the motivation for Talz. I do have an idea for Sarge to go. Right now, Sarge's motivation is order, and I've just switched it to duty. I've made that choice rather than just let it be randomly determined, because I kind of have an idea of what Sarge is going to be doing next. And then I wanted to see, I was curious. I was like, well, what's her new motivation, since it used to be survival? She survived. I guess she's achieved her outcome that she was looking for. I wanted something new to drive her, and I was really curious. I was like, I don't want to make that decision. I want to see what the game tells me is her new motivation, see where her character might go. And so I rolled on my D20, my makeshift motivation table that I created. And for her, I ended up rolling love as her new motivation, which I was surprised by. I am excited by. I'm also really curious by, to see what that means, and if it's, and who is it love for, and what the goal of that love is. I have an idea for Sarge already, what the duty is, and that's kind of where we're heading. Back into the story, we can see that our characters have changed quite substantially from their time, and one of the other things Sarge is really concerned about as they leave the room is that all of their gear was washed away. And Sarge looks like they are on a mission as they leave Talz's room, and this house of healing that they found themselves in as they both woke up from being expunged from the dungeon. Sarge has already had a conversation with Solgren about being equipped, re-equipped, and is on their way to meet up with the quartermaster of Spire. And that quartermaster's name is Esme Butcher. And she, the one who is... Spire is actually a cult. It'll be honest that it's a sun cult, and as the cult, they keep a stock of supplies for those who need to go out into the wilderness and bring back supplies, bring back whatever is needed, or just to simply explore and find out what's going on around the land. And so Esme is in charge in Spire of this quaint, basically stock store, general store that they have. Solgren has agreed to provide Sarge with whatever kind of equipment that they have on hand that Sarge would deem to be useful. So Sarge enters this small little house, and it's the house of Esme Butcher. And they look and see and knock on the door, I should say. Sarge knocks on the door before entering the house. A woman's voice does say, "Enter." Sarge enters and can see that it's actually just like a modern-day hoarder's house, essentially. It's just covered in supplies of all different types. Most of it's been broken down or bad need of repairs. But Sarge is looking around, and there's nobody in the room that they're in right now. And finally, the woman whose voice that Sarge heard, she comes from around a corner from a different room and says, "What can I do ya?" And Esme's a little bit of an older woman. She looks to be all business. She has her graying hair tied up in a very tight bun, and she's wearing a skirt, but also a leather apron, much like a blacksmith's apron. She's just kind of covered in sweat. She's coming in from the outside. That ding, 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 that repeated banging noise that Talz was hearing has also ceased as Esme comes into the home. "Well, I don't have all day. What can I do for you?" Sarge is still kind of shocked. "Well, Solgren sent me here for equipment Sarge is clearly shaken. There's more trauma there than I think that they're letting on from the events that happened in the last session that I played. Esme looks around and says, well, we got a lot of choices here, but are you looking for anything in particular? No, I'll do with whatever you have to spare. Anything will help. I'm going on a journey. I see. All right. Well, give me a moment. And I have these 10 optional gear packages from the Cairn First Edition. They're kind of like little class gear packages. I'm just going to roll for one. There's 10 of them. I'm going to roll a d10. See what we end up with Sarge, because there's not really classes in Cairn. And this will kind of, I don't know. I'm really excited to see. I'm going to see what Sarge is up to now. Okay, I rolled a 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 it's a fighter. Sarge already was kind of a bit of a fighter, but they lost all of their gear. And so, in addition to a few days' rations and a torch, Sarge also is given a heavy sword, a short sword, a tobacco pouch and pipe, and a dice set. What am I supposed to do with these? I'm sure you'll find a need. You got to keep yourself busy on the road. You never know who you're going to run into. And before Sarge can respond to that, Esme goes, who should I put the order down for? You need my name? Yeah, who is the order for? I just called Sarge. That's a weird name. I haven't heard one of them before. Well, it's really more of a title, less of a name, I guess. I don't even feel like it's applicable anymore. I lost some people, and a sergeant's really someone who leads people. Well, what do you want? You want Sarge on the form, or I got to keep my notes. My record log is impeccable. No. Call me Mender. Put my name down as Mender. Mender. All right, that'll do. Anything else I can get for you, Mender? No. Thank you so much. Esme leaves. She heads back out to the back where the blacksmiths and blacksmith's workshop is set up. Mender now can hear the bellows going again and hear just immediately tink, 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 the metal being worked right away, as if Esme barely had time to give to Mender and to have any breath. Mender returns now, equipped with their new equipment, basically having lost their identity as a Helenar steward. All of the equipment was basically destroyed. So now they're wearing just a tunic, sewn pants, hardened leather on over their shoulder, strapped in as just a rough piece of armor, and the new equipment that's been provided to them. And they return to the House of the Healing, and Solgren and Talz are just kind of sitting in silence. Talz drifting in and out of consciousness, and Solgren looks up and says, "Your friend needs you here. I said you could have the equipment. I didn't say you needed to leave right now." I know, but look, we failed our mission. The Empire wants a foothold on this side of the mountain. We've lost half the squad. More so, I mean, look at her. Talz isn't fit for anything right now. You're not fit for anything, she says, very faint and with a small smirk. Thanks, Talz. You know what I mean. Look, the path has been destroyed, right? That's what happened while we were gone? Yes, of course. Your path back over the mountains. It's painful that you're not able to get home right away and return to duty. That's not what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the fact that the Empire now is stuck on the other side of the mountain. They're going to try to get over here. They're going to find out that there's nobody here to receive them. You've lost half the village. Half of Spire is gone. Whatever. And they give a deep gulp and give it for a second before continuing. Whatever Midnight did in there, you need help. There's nobody else to help. This is the Greater Eastern Wilds that we're looking out upon, not civilization. Solgren chuckles to himself. Not civilization. It's quite the perspective you have, Sarge. It's Mender now. Talz raises an eyebrow at that, doesn't say anything. Mender, quite the perspective you have. I respect that you're not on your side of the mountains. And things look strange here. Things are strange. Members of the tradition have gone out, seeking the effects of Midnight's purging. And things are strange out there. They're dangerous. That's for certain. I can't argue with you there. There are societies out there. We're not some wilderness. To you, we might be the Greater Eastern Wilds, but to us, we're the extreme West. We're as west as you can go before crossing the mountains, of course. Be careful who you say that to out there. I didn't mean anything by it, Mender says. All I'm saying is that Helenar has no idea what happened over here, and we can't make it through the mountains. The only thing we can do is get a message south. I know it's probably worse off trying to go through the wilderness and trying to pass through the strait beyond the coast, but that mountain pass is destroyed. And even if it wasn't, to do it by myself, it would be just as risky, even if there was still a mountain pass to be passed through. There's no one else to do it. No one else, Solgren says. You think you're the only Helenari agents on this side of the mountains? Well, yeah, we were the first ones, the first expedition that was sent in a decade to reestablish contact with the wizard Baltothum. And no, that might be what they told you, but we've seen a solid stream of Helenari agents for the last several years come through here. None stay. They have some duty that they go off to. Now Talz is going to say, wait, no, that's not true. Sarge, why would they? It's not Sarge anymore. Talz, we barely have a squad, you and me. Fine. Mender, why would they lie to us about this? Mender looks down. I don't know, but regardless, Solgren, what happened here? The Empire has to find out. The stewards of the lodge must know what happened. Midnight could be anywhere. If this bridge of darkness is real, it could be everywhere. And the Empire has no idea. Talz sits up and groans with pain. Ugh. She holds her ribs with her good hand and says, I'm going with you. You're not going by yourself, Mender. Mender is just feeling real defeated right now, and they look over at Talz and says, not a chance. You stay here. You have to stay here and heal up. There's no way that you can come with me right now. Look at you. Now, here's a turning point. I want the game to decide. Random luck, fate, an oracle, whatever you want to call it. Both characters have a will of 13, and I want to see who's going to win this argument. I have 2d10s here. One's for Mender, one is for Talz. We'll see who has the stronger will. The lower the roll, the better. Mender rolled a 9, which is a success. However, Talz rolled a 2, which is a much more powerful success. Talz starts to get out of bed. Even though she's moving slowly, she's got determination beyond what Mender would have guessed. And she stands up, and Solgren grabs her for a moment, and Talz raises her hand. No. I got it. I got this. Talz, you don't have to do this. You're not leaving without me. I'm going to follow you. You leave this village without me, well, I'll catch up. It'll take some time, but I'll make my way down. I know where you're going. You just told me. I'll find you. Solgren, don't get me involved in this. I'm not here to hold anyone against their will. Face it, Mender. We're together in this. Solgren, I'm gonna need some gear. There's a farm full of animals and a young woman who's scooping hay with a pitchfork to feed the animals. And she's wearing just a standard dress and a little patch on it with a circle in white on a black background. 9 triangles facing inward towards the circle. She's feeding goats. Arthur Brim, come here now. Oh God, she's using the voice again. Arthur is a young man in his teens, and he has green skin. Not green pea green, but he does have a pale green tint to his skin, and his hair just cannot be kept. His hair is like as wild as the trees that he likes to climb. And his mother is calling from back steps of their estate house, and he comes running from the forest, and his mother she's got that face on also. It's not just the voice that Arthur is being called in by. He's greeted by the face. Arthur, what are you doing out there? It's time to come in. I don't care what you're up to. You need to listen and come inside. Arthur scratches at his hair, and dirt comes flying out of it, bits of leaves. He's clearly been up to his old shenanigans, but he places an old gnarled staff and a sling that he's got attached to his belt, as well as a pouch that he has slung over his shoulder, various random odds and ends. He places them all on this back deck of this estate house and comes in, and he could not be more dissimilar to the surroundings that he finds himself in, and yet these surroundings that he finds himself in are home. He can see the backdrop of the Great Daggerspine Mountains And one of the windows is the house is the ruling house of the small village that he lives in. The Brims are the ones who are in charge of the place. Servants scour the floors, they scrub. Arthur can smell food being cooked, and it's just amazing. It's what he's been thinking about all day while he's been out running around. His sisters are there. None of them have the same pale green tinge to their skin. And in fact, there's really not much at all that looks similar from Arthur to his sisters, or even really any relation to his mother. He goes immediately, washes up as best he can, changes into suitable clothes for the indoor setting and dinner, and he sits down, and the sisters are going a mile a minute. He has both older and younger sisters. They are just a handful for his mother. Arthur has a hard time connecting with them. Notably, he's the only male in the room. He's the only guy in the room. He doesn't necessarily feel more comfortable around men, but he does feel pretty much isolated, made to be an other in this space, even though it is his family. They all love him. They're all close to him, and he would do anything for any of them. They would do anything for him. But that being said, it's difficult to connect, and it always has been. He grabs food from the table as it's being placed out and just kind of devours it. He doesn't really participate in the conversations, but often one of his sisters to his right or his left will turn to him and say, "Art, don't you think so?" And then he'll turn and go, as he has a mouthful of food and just nod and agree, or he'll guffaw if it's the appropriate interaction. He's not present with his family, but he just doesn't really feel that strong connection with everyone else at the table. Finally, dinner's over, and he immediately gets up and goes to run outside and says, "I'll see you later. I got some work to do." And his mother laughs and says, "Don't you go anywhere." "Wait, Arthur!" She can't get a word out. He's out the door, and he makes it about 3 yards out from the back steps as he's grabbing his sling, grabbing his gnarled staff, and pulling on his pouch. And he runs face first into another young man and falls to the ground. I'm going to make him actually roll a dex check. Let's try that. I did create up his full character here, and he has dexterity. I rolled 2 very high numbers and 1 very pretty low number for 3d6. So his dex is a 14, though. That's pretty good. Ooh, he rolls a 16 and just charges face first, as I said. No awareness, no ability to dodge out of the way in the last minute. He looks up and just collides with his cousin Cal Brim. Cal goes sprawling as well. Art, every time I come over here, somehow you're always responsible for a new headache. Sorry, I didn't know you were there. Art, it's pretty clear that you don't really have a good idea of what anyone is here. Come on, let's go. Cal offers him a hand. Arthur takes it and is pulled up to his feet, and the two of them run off into the woods together. They travel for a while, are traveling old hunting trails, familiar trails. Cal finally looks over and says, "So have you heard?" "Heard what?" Arthur responds. "Well, there's this fog that's going around." "A fog? Really? That's what's going around right now?" I wasn't done yet," Cal says. "There's a fog, and it seems to be made of just pitch black smoke. Like someone's burning, I don't even know what. It's not associated with any smell. At least that's what people are saying." "What do you mean not associated with any smell? What does that even mean?" "I mean, it's not fire, obviously. I know you're really into the trees," and he motions all around him. "I just want to reassure you, none of your friends out here, at least not, with this fog, none of them around fire, per se." "That's great. I'm relieved to hear that," Arthur jokes. "What are we even talking about?" "Well, Lucius Ambrose. I don't want to hear about another Ambrose," Arthur says. "The Ambroses are, there's not a lot of good blood between the Brims and the Ambroses." "Lucius Ambrose," Cal continues, "says that the Cornelius Grove, where the shrine is, there's supposed to be black smoke, fog, whatever it is, it's moving in there. Cornelius Grove, but why would there be any fog rolling in there? There's nothing special about it." And he starts kind of counting on his fingers and looking up, and Cal can see that Arthur's getting lost in one of his great list makings that he's well known for. "What are you counting now, Arthur?" "Oh, just, the types of berries that you can find there. It's actually a pretty cool place if you can." And he stops himself. He's about to say talk to trees, and he knows that the rest of his family really isn't that keen on the fact that he can supposedly do this talking to trees. "If you like fruit salad." "Art, you're so weird. Look, do you want to check out Cornelius Grove or not? I guess. It's kind of getting late, Arthur. Cal. Arthur jokes back. No, seriously, Cal continues. Arthur, you're not afraid, are you? Shut up. Obviously, I am not afraid of the woods. Look, you want to go with me? You want to check this out? Yeah, Cal, let's go. And off they go. This whole area is just marked with groves and openings, and it's an old area with old bones and a lot of ancient burials, tombs, mausoleums even. A lot of burial mounds are in this area. Arthur and Cal, they're both able to see the shadow of these great mountains just off into the west of where they are from, where they're standing now. They can see the shadows of the mountains far off into the west from where they stand now. The sun is beginning to set, and it's just creating such a striking scene of oranges and pinks and purple hues as darkness is starting to kind of take hold of the forested land. As that happens, Arthur's going to light his torch just to cast some light in the area and for them to walk by, and he is going to kind of grip his gnarled staff in one hand and the torch in the other. A little more anxious, I think, than he would want to be, but he is able to keep it together so that he is able to not show off how kind of nervous he is to be going towards the Cornelius Grove with this mystery black fog smoke situation that's happening out there. They come across an opening in the woods in the treed area. Arthur does recognize it as Cornelius Grove. It has all of the various berries. Even in the torchlight, he can kind of make out the difference between them. Basically a treasure trove as far as berries go. And he just starts picking them at random. And as he picks them, he says, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." He thanks the trees or the bushes or wherever he's grabbing the berries from. Cal is having a look around. He puts a hand on his hip and says, "Maybe Lucius is a liar." "Well, I mean, it was good enough to come here to get the berries. I'm not minding that," Art replies, and he seems kind of oblivious to the situation. There doesn't seem that the torch itself is actually really doing a good job of illuminating this area. The shrine, the center of Cornelius Grove, is a white marble and reflects the light from his torch extremely well. Pretty easy to see in this area. If anything, it's pretty much the opposite of a black smoke or fog monster, or something like that might be coming into the area. Cal sits down on an outlet from the mausoleum, just a little stone platform that's kind of the entrance point into there. Kind of sits in frustration. Nothing ever happens ever here. Art, I can't believe that you chose to come here. And Arthur has a mouthful of various colored berries and says, "Well, I don't, the trees just took me here. I don't know. I just came here and good berries," Arthur says. As soon as he gets the word berries out of his berry-filled mouth, a crack of thunder lets loose. Rain begins, and Arthur looks up, Calbert looks up. Both of them are what locals would consider pretty solid weather watchers. Yet they're both surprised by this event. Neither of them really expected that it was going to rain. It certainly didn't seem like it was supposed to rain on this evening. They may have had second thoughts if that had been the forecast that they could have sensed. The rain starts to pick up very quickly. Arthur's torch actually starts to flicker and is dimmed and very quickly is snuffed out. And they're cast in darkness. It's clearly a cloudy night. You can hear the drops of rain really take up, and there's a lot of large flat-leafed trees in this area. Cal freaks out a little bit and says, "Of course, this has to happen to us. Something always has to happen." Arthur looks over and says, It's fine. It's fine. We'll figure this out, Well, worst case scenario, we camp here overnight in the rain. We get a little wet. We get a little soaked through. We get a little completely drenched. It'll be fine, Cal. We're still in the village, practically, As long as no creepy black smoke fog situation can start to happen, because the rain comes in, and that could be a sign. I'm just saying. Cal holds up a hand, shoves him a little bit when he realizes that Arthur can't see his hand very well. Arthur steps back, and he can now see a thin outline of Cal pointing at the pouch that that Arthur has slung over his shoulder. He's pointing at it, and his hand's shaking, and says, "What have you got there?" And Arthur looks down. He's shocked. He pulls out a porcelain pine cone, sculpted, and has somehow never had a piece of it break off in all the time that he's had it with him. And unlike any other time, however, that he's held it and kind of appreciated it, the thing itself is glowing with a white light. He looks down and he's holding it in his hand. He actually can't believe it either. And all of a sudden they hear rustling in the trees just beyond the grove, across from the entrance where they came in to enter the space. And they both take a step back, and Arthur holds the pine cone to his chest, trying to snuff out the light essentially, but it will not go out. And all it does is create really large shadows cast upon the white marble of this mausoleum as he's holding it like death gripped onto it. He can feel the individual pines like kind of making indentations on his fingers as he's holding it. Cal draws his short bow. He's a hunter and a tracker, and he has a short bow and arrow, and he's ready. He's got an arrow drawn. There appears a light from where that noise came. It's definitely not an orange light, like it would be from a torch or a fire or a lantern. It's actually a white light, very similar to the light that's being cast by Arthur's pine cone. I'm going to make a dex check here. I rolled a 3. Breaking through this bramble of branches and bushes that kind of line the grove. The light seems to be held up by what looks to be a massive like bush covered in long leaves that are draped on the ground, and the whole creature seems to be holding it up with one arm away from it towards where Cal and Arthur are. Arthur takes a step back and he starts immediately whispering a language that Cal has heard Arthur whisper before but can't make any sense of it. Arthur takes a step forward with his own light and holds it out in front. The bush monster with the light takes another step forward. Arthur's whispering this language that Cal can't make any sense of, but he realizes that, oh wait, is this Arthur trying to talk to this bush monster tree creature thing in the language of the trees that supposedly Arthur knows and nobody else can use? It must be that. The creature covered in this branches and leaves, suddenly another arm appears out from it. Other than the one that's holding this light, the arm seems to pull away sections of the creature's leaves or branches, and a face is revealed, a human face. Arthur can't make out really much specifics other than to see a pale face looking at him now, as if it was wearing this large costume of sorts. Finally, she pulls off the hooded robes of a ghillie suit, and it just falls to the ground of this grove. They can hear the weight of it just fall to the ground. The woman who's holding the light up now, the light that's reflecting off of the mausoleum, just like Arthur's light, says, "I don't know, kid, what you're talking about, but you guys gotta come help me. My partner, they're not doing too good." And Cal and Arthur both look at each other in shock. Cal starts to back away, and Arthur takes a step forward and says, "Lead the way." Cal shakes his head in resignation. The woman turns around, runs back away from the grove. Arthur bolts after her, and Cal is doing everything he do to keep up. As Arthur is able to keep the light in front of him, as this woman keeps the light out in front of her, he can see now some more details as he catches up to her. She's wearing garb that's not that non-traditional. There seems to ring a bell when he sees it, of some kind of memory, distant memory when he was very young, but he can't really place it. But he can see that she's wearing a tunic, and it's got a circle with 9 triangles on it. The circle and the triangles are all stitched in white, and the tunic itself is a light blue. Other than that, her underclothes, like her pants, the shirt she's wearing under the tunic, those things actually do look a little unusual for the area. He's not thinking too hard about that. He's thinking, oh, her friend needs help. We're gonna go help her. And then he notices actually she's limping pretty bad. She looks pretty beat up. She's got bandages on one of her hands. He can tell that she's recently been through quite an event. Finally, they break out of a wooded area into another grove. The two of them continue to follow her, come across a slightly older person, older than the woman that they were following. Not elderly by any means, but experienced, we'll say. And they're wearing a similar tunic to the one that the woman is wearing, similar style of clothing underneath the tunic, but their clothes are much more grayed out compared to the woman's more burgundy clothes that she's wearing. Most alarmingly, though, however, the partner, their face is completely shrouded in shadow. Even when the light comes near to show the rest of this person, their face is just featureless and is covered in what looks to be a black, inky nothingness. Like it's not even showing off any features. It's just like a complete blank slate. The edges of this darkness seem to kind of move and swirl, kind of wiggle as if it's alive itself. Mender. The woman gets down on her knees next to the partner and says, It's Talls. I've got some help. I don't know if they can do it, but she looks over at the two boys and says, do either of you know the great druid? Oh, what was his name? Arthur Brim? weeks earlier, Mender and Tals are observing this pass, and they're just kind of blown away. They spent weeks getting through it because it is a large mountain range, the Daggerspine Mountains. It's hazardous even in the best of times, and this is a moment that's following the conversation where Mender finally agreed. Tals, yes, you can come with me. The two of us will travel down south together. It might be a bit of a delay because your healing process is still being done. That's where we find ourselves today. As they're walking through the village, Solgren finds them again, motions them to sit down at a bench outside of the temple, erected to worship basically the sun and give praise to Helios, who is the sun god. From their perspective, it doesn't really align, and Tals is the one who knows this. Mender doesn't necessarily know, but Tals, as a magic user, is a little bit more trained and educated on the ways of the world. Not as much as what a chaplain would be as far as religious beliefs and rituals go, but Tals is aware. And so this god, that ancient temple that's been set up in Spire to worship Helios, it's kind of like what we would think of as like, pagan, like the Greek gods, like mythology rather than religion. Neither here nor there as far as Tals is concerned, and Mender's largely oblivious to it altogether. So Solgren, the elder druid, he invites them to a bench outside. It's under a tree that's ancient. It's massive. The trunk is easily, if Mender and Tals were to stand side by side, it'd be shoulder to shoulder as wide as them. Please have a seat. The time is soon approaching in which you will be departing, and I want to make sure that you are prepared. Of course, Mender replies to Solgren. Three of them sit down, and Solgren pauses a moment just to take in the sounds of the birds and kind of the peacefulness other than the ting-ting. Although there's a certain security reassurance that happens as a result of hearing Esme Butcher constantly working and reworking metal in her blacksmith shop. But Solgren is trying to take in the moment before he continues. Soon you will be departing and entering into the burial lands, the lowlands south of here. That is your next stop. There is very little as far as civilization goes between here and the village of the Brims. It has been some time since us Spherians have traveled down south, or really left the village at all. There's much work to be done. The greatest thing that I can point you to is the Brims village, which is a respite of sorts, and within a week or two you should be able to make your way down there. However, I do have someone that I would like to introduce you to, and he motions with his hand. And out of the shadows of the temple, completely oblivious, Mender and Tals had no idea that this short man, who looks just as broad as he is short, but very, very sturdy-looking individual with a long white beard, comes out of the shadows. Mort Kurtwell, glad to meet ya, he introduces himself. Solgren chuckles to himself and says, Mort is not of the Spherian tribe, but he is a trusted fellow, and he is a fantastic guide, even more so. Ah, Solgren, thanks for the vote of confidence. Anyways, I appreciate the gold more than the confidence itself, of course. Mender, Tals, Mort has agreed for a small fee to escort you down to the Brims village. Yeah, it's pretty quiet. There's not really much between here or there, as Solgren was saying. Not really much to harm us or really anything to worry about. I'm itching to get down there. I got a lot of work to do, and I don't really have, time to spare, you might say. We understand. And Mort, was it? Yeah, Mort. I think Tals here is getting there. I'm fine. I can get on the road anytime now. To show that emphasis, Tals throws her crutches away and stands up and does a little bit of walking. There's clearly a limp, but at the end of the little walk that she does a little bow. Mort claps. All right, looks good enough for me. Good enough for Mort. Good enough for you, Mender? I guess. I mean, we could leave as early as tomorrow. Great! Let's commence with the pre-adventuring drinking. Mort claps his hands. Solgren has to stop and say, Oh, Mort, one moment, please. Actually, Mort, you go ahead. You go find the tavern and tell them that drinks are on me. Order us 4. Of course. And off he goes. Solgren turns back to Mender and Tals and says, As Mort said, it's not exactly a dangerous journey. However, if you should need anything, there's a reason I'm sending you to the Brims village, and that is to have some respite, but also have a resource, someone who can provide comfort, guidance for the leg of your journey after that. You see, I have an ally in the Brims village. His name is Arthur, and when he and I were just boys, we were raised here in Spire. There was an incident He was outcasted. I haven't seen him since the early days of my adventures, my journey towards becoming the druid that I am today. However, Arthur was gifted. Even at that age, even as a boy, you could tell he could speak to the trees, and the trees would listen, and he would listen to them. Whole conversations could be had with just him mumbling the softest words, wind blowing over the leaves. After this incident, the village didn't know what to do. Sphire could not allow him to remain here, and so off he went. The Brims, they agreed to take him in. I haven't heard from him since. I have to assume in all this time, given how gifted he was at the beginning of his journey to meet his calling as a master druid, I have to imagine he is quite powerful and quite capable of providing any assistance you might need along your way. Talls, of course, we want to get you outfitted just as well as we did your friend Mender here, and you may go visit Esme at any time. She's ready. I do want to give to you each a blessed tabard of Helios, if you'll join me within the temple. And he stands up, guides them into the temple, and sitting on a rock altar that seems to be carved out of the mountainside itself are two light blue tabards, and they both have the insignia of the sun with the 9 triangles pointing outward, stitched in white, and he offers them, with a wave of his hand, to each take one. Mender and Talls, they both grab one. They both put their own tabards on and secure them with their belts. Immediately, Talls' limp feels a little bit less daunting. Her left hand feels a little bit more capable. She starts flexing her fingers and realizes that there was an immediate transformation that happened as a result of putting this tabard on. "Thank you, Solgren," Mender says. "There's nothing we can do to express our gratitude or pay you back for what you've done for us." "Oh, no. Think nothing of it. Sphire is a charitable village. We rely on the Halinari Empire for trade and new people to be passing through and to go to and fro. And I hope that this is the very beginning of being able to reopen the Daggerspine Mountain Pass, reconnecting our two halves of this land. It will be long, it will be difficult, but it is a journey worth taking, and the very first steps are for me to send you two on your way with the best possible chance for success." "Sounds good to me," Tall says. Solgren leads them out of the temple and straight towards the tavern. 3 of them join up with Mort. They have a pretty relaxing evening. Mender can't help but be curious about this incident that happened when Solgren was a youth with this other boy, this elder who's certainly very powerful and grown into his strength over the years. Arthur Brim, evidently. As curious as they are, they don't let that curiosity go towards Solgren because of all of what Solgren has already provided and given to them and to Talls, and not wanting to cause any real disruption between now and the time when they must leave Sphere and head south. The next day, they wake up a little worse for wear from the evening of drinking and frivolity that they used to celebrate the eve of their exit from Spire and the beginning of their journey south. It's overcast, it's gray, cloudy, foggy. Mort's up first and knocks on the door in this house of healing that Mender and Talls have been staying in, and Mender's already sitting in bed, fully outfitted, tabard from Spire over the rest of their outfit, and a cloak pulled up over their shoulders, and they can feel the threat of a storm or rain starting to roll into the weather. Talls gets up slowly, a little stiff, had been wearing the tabard all night, and actually doesn't have the same affected feel that Mender has from the drinking with Mort and Solgren. In fact, her knee has healed up quite a bit from whatever had caused it to be bashed up when they were expelled from the Bridge of Darkness in the first place. Her hand, still bandaged, still has some deep, deep bruising, but she starts to feel that the tendons aren't as stiff. The bones don't click and clack and pop as she flexes her hand. It's really encouraging. She's really excited. She grabs her new pack of equipment, which includes a ghillie suit made up of leaves and sticks, and it's like kind of a mess, a tangle of nature that Esme had been experimenting with putting together. Talls packs that into her rucksack, as well as a couple of pages of a spell book that Solgren has provided. Otherwise, they're carrying, each of them, some rations. Mender, as I had mentioned previously, was given a long sword and a short sword, some leather armor, and Talls is notably not wearing any armor, but both of them have, beneath everything else, the clothes that they were found in, discovered in, washed and cleaned, but still definitely worn for wear. They're basically their steward's uniforms, and Mender's is much more gray. Talls' still has some hints of maroon, the deep red that is the color of the Helenar Empire. Well, time to get going, Mort says, and he just belches loudly at the end of the sentence. Mender and Talls greet him, and at the edge of the village, Solgren is waiting. Just remember, south. Always head south. There shouldn't be much to worry about, at least not until you get to the Brims village in the Burial Lands. There are unusual things to be found down there. I'm fairly confident that the three of you should be able to figure out how to be successful and maybe how to avoid those things that are most treacherous. Mender gives Solgren a look as if they were hoping more information would be shared. What kind of treacherous things? But then soon realizes Solgren and really nobody other than Mort has been even out of the village for quite some time, for years now. It's very isolated, and all that they really get are rumors of interactions and instances and encounters with unexplainable things in the Burial Lands to the south, where the Brims village can be found. Mort just chuckles, doesn't add anything to Solgren's vague warnings. Off they go, and they head south. There's a small path that Mort starts leading them down, and it's just like an old goat's path. As they descend from Spire down into the lower highlands, essentially, fog really envelops them. Mort just waves it off with no concern and says, "Oh yeah, that's the normal thing that happens every time I come into Spire, every time I leave Spire. It's just the way of the land. I think it's why so many few people like to come and visit the Spherians. Well, that and, them being a bunch of weirdo cultists. But they pay. I don't know where they get the money, but they pay." Mender and Talls just follow behind Mort, and he is chatty. Mender gets the feeling that Mort likely spends a lot of time on his own in the woods, in the mountains, and doesn't get a chance to talk to a lot of people, so when the opportunity presents itself, he does not pass it up. He takes full advantage. They travel for a few days really uneventfully through this fog and mist, and it clears from time to time. But largely, Talls and Mender rely on Mort to keep leading them. It's very difficult, even in daylight, to determine that they continue to head south. They definitely have some experience traveling in the wilds, and even with the unrelenting overcastness of the clouds, the grayness of this land, Mort seems more confident than ever, just following this path down into the mountain, down from the mountains, that they're continuing to head south. He's well aware of what their mission is that they've been charged with, both from themselves, from the perspective of their obligation and their duty to reach the Helenar Empire and talk to the stewards once again, but also the mission that they've now been charged with by Solgren to get the process rolling to reopen this mountain pass from the Helenar Empire to the west to Spire and leading into the Greater Eastern Wilds, where they find themselves stuck now. Well, one night they're sitting around the fire. "What do you think of the land that you've seen so far?" Mort just kind of growls out as he's tearing away at some game that they had successfully hunted and had charred upon the fire itself that they're sitting around. "Well, I don't have much to base it off of," Mender replies. "We've never been past Fire before. That was as far as we've gotten. The lands seem peaceful enough. I can't believe we haven't encountered another living soul in this whole time." "Yeah," Talls adds. "I kind of wonder what's the deal with that. It's almost like it's too quiet around here." "Oh, yes. Yes, the wilds are quite quiet, but there's also some liveliness to be found. To be honest, I am a little concerned." He stops his sentence there. "Yeah?" Mender kind of tries to get him to open up a little bit. "What's the concern? You're kind of making me a little concerned." "Oh, no. Not at all. You see, the landscape, the land itself, seems to have been altered, you might say, by the earthquake, the catastrophe that hits while you were all off in some dark cavern somewhere, talking to some mysterious stranger. I don't know much about that. When I was up in Spire, and I got trapped up there with the rest of you, when that earthquake hit, well, I was kind of wondering what the land would look like down below. It was not good to be in the mountains, but you never know what happens down below." "Yeah, I agree," Mender replies, and trying to get more out, squeeze him like a sponge to get more information out of Mort, but Mort is kind of reticent to talk. "I'm a little confused, Mort. You gotta give us a little bit more than that." All right, well, for instance," and he looks around, and they're in a bit of an outcropping of cliff and ledges that stick out over them. There's a cave opening. There's actually a series of 3 cave openings that dig into the mountain further. They've just been walking down this path, basically hugging the mountains this whole time. And the fire itself reflects off of the smooth but very uneven and sharply angled rock patterns that surround this kind of three quarters of an alcove that leads back into the mountains. This place is new. I've never seen it before. It's like the earthquake carved it out itself. Wait, you've never seen this before? Tall says. This place looks like it's ancient, like it's been here forever. Like, I know, but it looked like a good place to set up camp, and so here we find ourselves. Hold on. You're saying we're setting up camp with mysterious 3 openings, 3 different ways that something could come out and get us? That's Mort. No. There's nothing here. The burial lands. We're not even in it yet. That's where you really have to look out for the strange creatures that might come out of nowhere. You might not even see where they're coming from. And as he says the word from, they also hear a very loud scratching and creaking noise that sounds like rock against rock, just scraped against each other. And then they hear the first thud, 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 thud. And there's some movement that's happening from within one of the openings that leads into the mountains, and they all go silent. The only thing that they can hear is the scraping of the stone on stone, the thudding of what sounds like something that's getting closer and closer, and then in between those noises, the crackling of the fire that they built up between them. And here I'm going to roll. There's 3 possibilities of where this sound could be coming from. Given where they're at, there's 3 openings into the mountainside. I'm going to roll to see which one it's coming from. It's coming from actually the center, which is directly opposite from the opening of this alcove that they find themselves in. Let's see if anyone has an idea of that. I'm going to roll a d20. Let's make it a will check. So we'll roll for Mender first. Mender got a 6. They're aware of it being coming from the center. Roll for Talls next. Ooh, an 18. Definitely not aware. Talls is starting to freak out. It's not looking too good as far as making sense of this new sudden sensation of fear and anxiety. And I'll roll for Mort. All right, Mort is also aware where the sound is coming from. Mort, I haven't rolled up into a full player character at this point. Mort is like a hireling kind of situation, so I'm just giving Mort 10 across for all 3 stats, strength, dexterity, and will, and I rolled a 10 on my d20 for him to find out, to see if he knows where things are coming, where this sound is coming. So all 3 of them prepare and look around. They see an outline thanks to their fire. As the 2 of them point to Talls, it's coming from that direction. It's coming from the center opening. And so they all kind of back away from there and see what looks to be like a large head looming out, almost filling up the entire opening itself. And the opening is large enough that Mender, they could walk in and not have to duck. But this head is filling the entire opening itself. 2 horns can be seen as well as the head sticks its way out of the opening. Shoulders followed, and the thing looks like it's carved from the same stone as the mountains itself. It almost seems perfectly blended in, and if it wasn't moving at all, and if it wasn't breathing loudly, then it would almost be impossible to tell that this creature was separate at all from the mountain itself. But out it comes, and one arm just reaches out, grabs a chunk of the ground, and pulls itself, and it's pulling and heaving its body. And you can tell now, the 3 of them, that the sound that of the scraping noise was actually the body of this creature versus the cavernous walls and the ceiling of this rock tunnel. And out it comes, and it's just hauling itself out, and the 3 of them are like, in our terms, a WTF. They're wondering what the heck this thing is. They've never seen anything like it, and they make their way out. The creature makes its way out and stands up, and it just keeps standing, keeps getting higher and higher, and it seems to be at least twice as tall as Mender, who's the tallest of the group. It does not look happy. It looks pretty pissed off, in fact. I'm going to have all 3 characters roll for Dex to see how quickly they react to this creature appearing. Mender's Dex is very low. It is a 7, so I need a 7 or lower. Ooh, I got a 7. Good for Mender. Talls, a little bit better at a 10. 16. Talls is just, I think Talls is too put off by the sudden appearance of this creature, unexplained creature. But Mort's going to roll also at the 10. Ooh, at 19. Mort is dumbfounded. I don't think he's necessarily afraid. He's seen quite a few things in his time. He, I think, is thrown off by the fact that, like, he's never seen this type of a creature. and certainly not in these lands. So Mender's the only one who's aware, is able to act for this first round of combat. We left off on the edge of combat, and I'm going to use a combination of Cairn light OSR rule system for my actual combat, but also using the actual entry from the giant to determine, because Dragonbane is set up wonderfully as far as running monsters go. You roll a d6 every round, and each monster in the bestiary has a table of results of what the monster is actually going to attempt to do, what kind of action. It runs itself extremely well, and I'm really excited to see how to translate the action that I roll on the d6 for this giant in combat, how it will translate to maybe how the rules in Karn work, some special homebrew stuff, home-ruled things that I've got going here, prepped for myself, for my characters in the scene. We're in this alcove. The three of them were sitting around a campfire. The campfire is still going. I've introduced for myself a countdown timer for when the campfire is going to go out if it's unattended, and it's their only source of light really in this small alcove, this three-sided inlet into the mountainside, the lower mountains, and it's been recently revealed, excavated, and so these openings are something that Mort had not seen before. Wasn't really too disturbed by it. Not a lot happens in this journey between Spire and the Burial Lands and the village of Brim. They set up camp here. They were just sitting around telling stories, chit-chatting, getting caught up on the day, starting to rest, and they heard this grinding noise come from the center of these three openings that surround them. Massive figure in this face with these horns, and one arm comes reaching out of this opening that's in the center of this alcove, and this sound of scraping stone just surrounds them and echoes and reverberates all around them. And finally, a creature who seems to be at least twice as tall as Mender, who's the tallest member of this party, stands up fully and pulls out an ancient-looking, like petrified tree trunk, essentially, behind it, and stands up fully, and they can see now that it's covered with dust. Its skin seems to be almost the same color as the dust itself that it's covered in. There's clouds of this dust, almost like a chalky cloud that comes off of it. All three of them were stunned initially by the appearance of this giant stone creature. Mender, of the three of them, was able to gain their senses and has drawn their longsword, which in Cairn it uses two hands. It's a two-handed weapon, so they grab it, grip it in both hands, and kind of take up a defensive position around the fire and around Talz and Mort, putting themselves in between this giant and the other two members of their party. The fire will be rolling on a usage die, so basically if the campfire, it's a d6 at the end of every combat round. Actually, I'm going to change that. In the moment, I'm going to change it. Whenever the giant goes, I'm going to roll the d6. So it's kind of in the middle of the round. On a 1 or 2 result of the d6, it drops to a d4. And then in the future, when the giant goes, I'm going to roll a d4. On a 1 or a 2, the d4 is used up and the fire will go out. So there's a ticking time bomb of light in this. I don't think you have to be a genius. You don't even have to be as smart as Mort Cutwell to get a sense that maybe a creature who lives in total darkness isn't too afraid of a fire going out, isn't going to be too bothered by that. So it's definitely a time crunch on the side of my player characters. Mender take the first action here, and in Cairn, combat's pretty intuitive. We're going to have Mender slide forward a couple. I've got a little battle mat in front of me with some Dragonbane standees, which are just wonderful. I love the art, and I love having these little standees for myself. And we're going to move Mender into combat with the giant, knowing that Mender's drawn their two-handed longsword, and we're going to have Mender take a sweep towards one of the knees of this giant creature. So the longsword has a d10 damage die. In Cairn, everyone hits automatically. There's no to hit roll. There's simply damage rolls, and then the damage roll itself is modified by the armor of the target. And this creature has a natural armor of 1. Skin is stone tough. Just in general, Cairn says that the highest armor NPC, a PC, a creature can have is 3. So 1's still pretty moderately tough. Ooh, I rolled a 2. So Mender, not maybe being super confident about this action, still takes a step forward, and years of combat training comes to their mind. They've been in battles, they've been in wars of Halinari expansionism and colonialism, as the western portion where the Halinar Empire of the subcontinent has been conquered over time. And Mender's not innocent of these battles and these wars of aggression. However, it's been a while. It's been a little bit since Mender's been in combat and has had to take violent action. And also, perhaps something in the time has changed Mender since they have been, had seen this great loss from their squad of fellow stewards and been in the Bridge of Midnight. All of that being said, I rolled a 2, going to subtract 1 from the armor of this hill giant, and it just chips away at a bit of the kneecap. The giant's not too bothered by this, clearly just kind of groggy and waking up still from whatever kind of deep slumber it had been. It had found itself in this cavern, in this tunnel. But I'm going to roll now to see what the giant does, because the giant gets to go next. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to roll the usage die on the campfire to see if the campfire is still roaring just as strong. It is. I rolled a 4. So the campfire's still there, still doing well. But we're going to roll now for the hill giants what their action is. I rolled a 1, which in the bestiary says crushing blow. The giant swings its fist or club and bashes a player character with all its might. Pretty straightforward. It's probably, like I said, groggy and upset, and it's just going to try to bring this petrified tree trunk that's in its hand and slowly sweep towards Mender on this. So we're going to roll a d8 for the hill giant attack, and the hill giant might get a little more powerful after a round or 2 of waking up, but we'll see. It's a d8, and Mender has 1 armor as a result of the equipment that they were provided back in Spire. I rolled a 1. All right, so clearly Mender is able to dodge out of the way, hit protection, serving them well. The light armor of the leather shoulder armor plating that they have on allows them some extra mobility. So the hill giant... And the it's like making children sound effects now. The petrified tree trunk scrapes across the stony, rocky, gravelly ground of this alcove, but does not actually impact Mender at all. It just kind of goes on its way, and the momentum actually takes the hill giant over a step or 2 and kind of throws it off balance for a moment. That's the end of that actual round. The other 2 characters didn't get to act because they didn't meet their initiative roll. It's pretty straightforward again. I probably could say that for everything in Karen. Either you make your dex check at the beginning of combat or you don't. And I think what I'm going to do, I'm blanking. Can't remember exactly if I roll every round for dexterity, but I'm kind of interested in that to see. I'm going to roll it for all 4 of these, or all 3 of the player characters here, Tals, Mender, and Mort. Roll all 3 of them and see who gets to go before the hill giant recovers and moves, and who gets to move after the hill giant. So let's do that. So I'm going to roll for Mender first, and Mender has a 7 dexterity. I rolled a 5, so Mender gets to act at the top of the round. Tals has a 10 dexterity. Rolled a 15. Tals has to wait until after the giant goes. And Mort, being a hireling, has 10 across all 3 of his stats. He rolled a 14. So actually the same outcome as last time. I didn't even need to roll to determine who gets to act when, but it'll be Mender acting first, kind of already in the sequence of the battle, already in the lethal dance of combat with their long sword drawn. And then the giant will act, and then we'll follow up with Tals and Mort taking their first actions this round. Mender's going to continue to try to sweep in and maybe start to flank the right side of this giant, seeing that it's possible to damage it. The longsword doesn't seem to be any worse for wear after taking a nick out of the kneecap of this giant's left leg. Let's try now for the right leg. So let's make another roll with the longsword. That's considerably better. So I rolled a 5. Minus 1 will put us at 4 HP of damage. So that was a big hit. And that definitely caused the giant to have to kneel down as it assessed the damage that it took on its right leg. So it's kneeling, it's kind of on one foot, one good leg, and one damaged leg. And it's actually holding the tree trunk in its right arm. So it's just let's see what, actually, before I say this, I'm going to roll for the fire. Let's see if the fire still continues. Fire's still good. And then I'm going to roll now for the giant's action. Let's see how it reacts to this big hit it took on its leg. 4. Ooh, a sweeping blow. The giant sweeps its club at all enemies within 6 meters. The attack inflicts bludgeoning damage and knocks the victims down. So there's only one enemy, and that is Mender. So it's only going to attack Mender. However, now that it's woken up, I'm going to be rolling a D10 instead of a D8 on the attack, and this will still knock Mender down to be basically prone, essentially. Okay, so I rolled a 3. So Mender takes 2 damage off of their HP, their hit protection. Here's another good time to mention how seemingly fragile characters are in Cairn. Mender starts with 6, and they're down now to 4 hit protection. Hit protection also heals up incredibly quickly. It is not hit points. Mender is knocked down and definitely gets the wind knocked out of them. This petrified tree trunk swings and actually just kind of like explodes on impact against Mender. Debris from this tree trunk goes everywhere. The weapon is gone, but Mender is definitely worse for the wear on this hit. Now we're going to actually utilize Talls for the first time in combat. Finally, Talls will be able to take action. Now, Talls does have some spells. Look them up again to refamiliarize myself. She received those from Solgren before leaving, and she has Anthropomorphize. I'm going to say probably not too helpful in this situation. When you cast Anthropomorphize, an animal either gains human intelligence or human appearance for 1 day. So that's more of a utility spell. However, Talls also has Displace. An object appears to be up to 15 feet from its actual position. And what I'm going to do now is have Talls cast Displace, and there's no spell casting roll or anything like that. But whenever you cast a spell from a spell book, you gain a fatigue in your inventory. And there's only 10 inventory slots. Talls is actually using 7 of her 10 inventory slots. Casting Displace, I'm going to have her cast that upon Mender. As I mentioned in a previous episode earlier on, Talls is actually oriented to the Bridge of Fire. And so she gathers up herself, her wits, now that she's seen Mender get hit, and it's like an explosion of wood splinters and everything, and it's chaos. The fire itself is casting these massive shadows on the walls of this alcove and the ceiling of the cliff that hangs over it. Clouds of this chalky dust are just forming and rolling off of the hill giant as well. Talls is now ready to take action and help out, and is going to cast Displace, pulling up from her inside somewhere and pulling it out of her, basically like making a motion to pull it out of her chest. She casts Displace over towards Mender's direction to hopefully disorient the giant and make it impossible for the giant to really target where Mender is. Mender is now appearing, if you think of it, on a grid 3 squares away from where they really are. The giant is none for the wiser that this has happened. The giant's clearly not a creature of high intelligence since it just started attacking them out of the blue. Talls casts this and gains a fatigue. So that is now their 8th of 10 potential spots on here. Is going to start to slide over, make some movements over to where Mender is pretending to be, I guess, is where she pretends Mender is, to maybe add some more illusion to this. Mort. So Mort being Mort, he is got not a lot of tricks up his sleeve. He just has a simple short bow, and he's going to roll it, and that's a d6 damage. He's going to try to shoot it right at the rock giants. Ooh, he rolled a 6. So -1 armor. Thinking Mort knows you always aim for the eyes. You always aim for weak spots if you can. One of the arrows goes right into the eyes, a soft jelly-like eye of this stone giant, and really enrages it. It gets incredibly angry. Top of the round, and I'm going to have Mender not make a roll since they got knocked down. They're going to have to pass for this turn. But we'll see if Talls and Mort get to go before the giant does. So Talls, again, has a 10 dexterity. Rolled a 20. So I'm actually going to say Talls actually loses her action. She can still make a move or like a quick action, but that's rough. That is a critical failure on that dexterity check. Mort, let's see what Mort's up to. Mort rolled a 5, so Mort can still go. Mort will now take a step to get into some better range of the creature and attempt to make another shot with drawing another arrow swiftly from his quiver, pulls his sharp bow taut, and lets loose an arrow towards the creature. Rolled another 5. I'm not going to say he gets the other eye, but he definitely has found some spots. Maybe the head and the neck are a little bit less well armored and protected from the stony skin of the creature, and he's just raining down arrows upon this thing, just peppering it. It is upset. It's definitely starting to really feel some pain here. Potentially, you could even say is getting into its death throes. Let's have the fire. Let's roll for fire to see if that gets diminished at all. Nope, still strong. They must have loaded up the fire with a lot of fuel right before this creature came out. However, it is the creature's turn. Let's roll to see what the creature does. Ooh, I rolled a 6. Stone throw. The giant grabs a large rock and throws it at an enemy within 10 meters. The victim suffers bludgeoning damage and is, of course, knocked down. Gonna pick up a massive boulder, and now that he's unarmed, he's searching around. He's holding one injured eye with his one hand and reaches for anything he can, hurls it towards Mort. Let's make a roll to see how much damage this does. That's a 10. Sad to say, that might be the end of Mort. That's a huge hit. Mort's not wearing any armor. He's just he's a tracker. He's a wilderness survival guy. He travels lightly. So 10 damage is going to be more than most seasoned characters can take in one hit in Cairn. And Mort is seasoned, but the boulder is just about the same size as him and just smashes into him. And he gets pinned against this gravelly ground. The rock lands, basically thudding on top of him. And he just screams in pain. Arr! That's what he does. Talz now is caught, trying to get over to Mender to check on them, and seeing that Mort is just probably way worse for wear than he's ever been in his life, long as his life might last. So Talz is kind of stuck. Talz will, again, rolled really poorly on her initiative roll, so I think Talz will just continue to move over to Mender. She has to have her priorities, and her loyalties, of course, lie with her longtime companion and leader, sergeant of her squad. So she's over there, and she is able to help Mender to their feet. I'll say that much at least. That's the end of that round. Let's roll again now. Mort's definitely pinned down. He's not going to be doing much. Roll for Mender first to see if they pass their dexterity check. That's a miss. I rolled an 8 and I needed a 7 or less. Talz, let's see how she does. 13 and 10. So the giant is going to act first. This is going to be rough. This is not going to be a good time for anybody involved. Let's roll for the fire to see if that starts to go out. Nope, still going strong. It's blazing. It's almost more terrifying that they can see that the fire is still blazing as strongly as it has been. The giant now is going to see Talz standing next to a blurred kind of outline of Mender. The problem being that Mender and illusionary Mender are in a line straight. So it's very likely that the giant, if it runs towards this illusion of Mender and where Talz is standing further away, could just barrel right through Mender. But we'll see. Let's see what happens. I'm going to roll for the giant's action. All right, I rolled a 1. It's a crushing blow. The giant swings its fist or club, bashes a player character with all its might, and then knocks it down. So it is going to, I'm going to roll, just do a 50-50 roll essentially to see if it runs into the actual character, the actual physical representation Mender is, or if it just kind of swings right by and doesn't catch it. I rolled a 1, so it's going to actually collide with Mender and realize that, wait a minute, and look very confused and and it'll be like, kind of asking a question of the space, but it doesn't really care. It's just going to bring its fist down on actual Mender. See, it's not going to be very pretty. Let's see what happens. I'm going to roll a d10. I rolled a 7, so -1 for Mender's armor is a 6. That puts Mender at -2. It's a big hit, and it does knock Mender down. That being said, something incredibly alarming happens as the giant's fist collides with Mender, basically straight in their face. Just a punch from a bison colliding with you. Talz first screams in shock and terror as she sees her longtime companion and compatriot get hit. Mender falls to the ground after getting kind of thrown a little bit from the power of the force of the punch. I'm going to roll a d6 here. I rolled a 5. A shadow, even in the bright blaze of this campfire that they've got going, a shadow falls upon Mender, and Talz, tears coming to her eyes. She can't really make out the details of Mender other than that, almost as if the light of this world is going out. For her only real connection still left alive on this side of the entire continent. She thinks Mender is passing, but a shadow covers Mender, and Mender stands up and takes an action, and Mender will rush the giant now, broadsword in 2 hands, ready just to kind of stab, a charging, stabbing motion, almost as if the broadsword itself was like a large boar spear. Talz can't believe that she's even seeing this with her own eyes, that somehow Mender is able to stand up and charge the creature. Even what seemingly should have been, what just happened to Mort, should have been Mender's fate as well. Mender's going to make a roll. I rolled an 8, so -1 from the armor. Mender leaps into the air, just covered in darkness and shadow. Still some details, but the tabard that they're wearing, that light blue tabard with the sun and the 9 pointed triangles sewn in white, seems to be covered in darkness. The colors of itself, of the design itself, fade to obscurity. Mender's able to jump up and smash the tip of their sword basically through a vital part, the throat of the giant. And the giant falls, and Mender lands on top of it, sword still sticking out of the giant's neck, essentially. Talz rushes over, gasps as she sees that a black miasma is starting to come over and take over Mender's body. And she pulls Mender off of the giant, pulls the sword out of the giant's throat and puts it back in Mender's scabbard and starts to lift up Mender, who's silent and is not making any noise, but evidently is still breathing. And the two of them run. They do all that they can. Talz has no idea what to do to help. She knows that they can't stay here, and they run off into the woods. As they're running, thunder crack breaks out, and rain begins to fall. And we will leave it there. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk again soon.